Welcome everybody to our Cybersecurity Fundamentals Bootcamp. My name is Chris Johnson. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at GoCloud Careers. I am joined by Mike Gibbs, our founder and CEO. Also, we are joined by Isaac. Isaac, I always mispronounce your last name, so correct me. Colinzi?
That's perfect. Yeah,
Oh,
you
all
got it.
right. I
Thank
got
you.
it first right.
Yeah.
Isaac is he might blush if I say this. He's an identity and access management expert, some guru, wonderkin, whatever you want to call him. So he's actually joined us today to be able to cover that particular domain. So we're going to be getting started here in a few minutes. We're going to, give everybody a opportunity to join. We know people will be joining throughout the webinar. They'll be popping in and popping out, but we'll try and get a critical mass, I guess you would say, here within the next minute or so. So while we're waiting for that, let us know where you're from in the chat box. We always like to know where everybody is from. So also, just so everybody knows, in addition to myself and Isaac and Mike, we also have Leo. He's in the chat box as Leopoldov. We also have Tyrone. They are going to be helping me kind of facilitate and moderate these sessions. But few few things I want to share with everybody before I let Mike and Isaac kind of take over is we're going to be doing this we have set aside 4 hours for today. Now, of course, that's all relative to how the content coverage goes. So it might be a little shorter, might be a little longer, hopefully not that longer. But we're going to try and take advantage of that. What we'll do is we're going to bounce between covering content and taking questions. So it's going to really follow that same format that we do on our YouTube boot camps, but we really wanted to bring it into this Zoom setting because this is how we do our classes that are within our career development programs is within Zoom. So if you're not part of any of our career development programs, this is really how we do our stuff. Not a lot of bells and whistles, not a lot of glitz and glamour. Just teach and interact with you. So we're gonna do the content and then we're gonna take some questions. Do the content, we're gonna take some questions. Now we're probably not gonna be able to get to every single question that comes in. If there's a high volume of questions, we will need to cut some of them short just in the interest of being able to move the program along. As much as we would love to be able to answer every question that comes in, sometimes it's just not feasible in the interest of being able to maintain the pace to stay on track. We may have to cut it short sometimes. Now we are keeping track of every question that comes in. So in the event that we don't get to answer it live, we'll huddle up over the course of the boot camp and try and put together kind of not a frequently asked questions page, but a question and answer page, like that we can facilitate responses to questions that we may not have been able to answer during the live setting. So I'm going to do everything we can to make sure we provide the best benefit to all of you. So that's all I've got. I'm your master of ceremonies, your man in charge. I'm the one that's going to come in and tell everybody we got to get back to the lectures when we're having fun. That's always me that comes in and stops the fun. So uh, that's all I've got. I'm going to let Mike talk a little bit now, and I'm gonna disappear to the background for a little bit.
Well, welcome everyone. Today is the day one of the Security Fundamentals Bootcamp, and we've got a pretty ambitious agenda for, say, the next 5 weeks. So what I'm going to talk about, at least initially, is what is security. I'm going to talk about the domains of security, And then we're going to focus on, in today's world, probably the biggest domain, which is identity and access management. Now, I have over 25 years experience in network security and other forms of architecture, but Isaac has 2 decades of experience as an identity and access management architect, consulting to the world's largest banks and the world's largest enterprises. So I brought him in today to actually help me. So first, I want to talk about what is security? I mean, for real, what are we talking about with security? We're talking about protecting an organization, the organization's assets, and the organization's people. And there's many flavors of security, but we're going to talk about it from a perspective of cybersecurity. I'll then walk you through the domains, and then Isaac's going to take over today for primarily identity and access management. So if we look at what we're really trying to achieve here, there's really 3 major things that we need to do to secure an environment. We need to make sure we have what's called confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But what does that really mean? Well, let's break it down into reality. So let's say we're dealing with a pharmaceutical company that's got the secret formula for a new drug. They don't want that drug that they've spent $1 billion on, that secret formula, be getting out to someone else. How about your patient medical records? You know, you may not want someone to know that you had a little mini stroke out there, and you may not want people to know about that, for example. So if that gets out, would an employer be less likely to hire you because they were worried about your health? Well, who knows? Theoretically and legally, they can't be, but that's still something to be concerned. What if somebody got your bank account numbers and transferred all of your savings away? So when we call confidentiality, we're really talking about privacy of the systems. Now, when we talk about integrity, we're really talking about something that most people don't typically think about. So I want to make that clear to you. Integrity is the systems being as they're supposed to be. So what does that really mean? The system being what it's supposed to be. So you've got a great career. You take a job at NVIDIA, you cash out on the stock, and all of a sudden you've got a couple $1 million in the bank. You got lucky there. Do you want somebody to zero it out and you have nothing? Probably not. Now, what happens if you would go to the hospital and the physician ordered 0.25 milligrams of something that was an IV dosage, and some hacker changed that 0.25 milligrams to 250 milligrams and someone died? That's integrity. So when we talk integrity, don't mean to do that. It could be the integrity of our data, but it could also be the integrity of our systems. Meaning, what if our cloud was taken down? Now the systems aren't what they're supposed to be, so there is that. Now, the last component of what we're really trying to do is security. Is what's called availability. So availability means the systems are there. So if you need to give a presentation and on the way to the presentation you are kidnapped, are you going to be available to give that presentation? No. So if a system was hacked, if a cloud provider was hacked and the entire cloud provider goes down, are they going to be there to serve their customers? No, because the cloud's hacked and it's not going to be there. So what we're really talking about here when we get to this concept of confidentiality, integrity, and availability is making sure that the systems keep whatever is private, making sure that the systems don't change. If you've got 50,000 virtual machines, you should have 50,000 virtual machines, not 55,000 because a hacker launched 5,000. And the systems need to be there because if you're getting hacked, for example, if you've got a web server that can handle 10,000 requests per second and all of a sudden you get a DDoS attack at 100 million requests per second, your systems are not there. So that's the concept of availability, integrity, and confidentiality. And that's what we're typically trying to deal with. We're protecting the organization. Well, that could be the company. We're protecting the organization's assets. It could be the confidentiality of a secret formula. It could be they've got 2 scientists that are able to do 2 things that no one else in the world can do, and that's their next business thing. Whatever that is, we're making sure that those systems have not been changed and they're available to do what they need. So let's break that down into other elements. What's it going to take to go to security? And I can tell you right now where everybody fails the security interviews, and I've done thousands of them. When I ask someone, how do you make your cloud secure? And they say, just turn on these AWS services. And literally speaking, it's like you're escorted out of here. What do I need to do to secure it? Oh, you just need the simple Palo Alto firewall. Well, here's the key. I love the Palo Alto firewall. It's awesome. But the key is you need more than one thing for security. And that's really what we're going to be talking about is what does it take to actually provide security? And I've used 7 domains of security. Some people have their own. So let's talk about what those domains are. And then we're going to focus on what's most critical in today's world, which is identity. And that's due to a lot of weaknesses in cloud computing and software as a service providers compared to traditional data centers. So let's talk about what these basics are. So the first thing that goes into cybersecurity is risk management. Okay. The ability to identify an asset, classify that asset, to determine the risk to that asset and prioritize the risk. So let me make it clear. This could be cybersecurity. This could be physical security. If you've got someone that needs to go to point A, point B, and you determine that they're a high value target, it's going to take a certain plan for you to get that person from point A to point B, lead cars, follow cars, bulletproof cars, what have you. That's physical security risk management of a dignitary, for example. But risk management could also be on the secret formula of the new drug or the brand new video game that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar game to keep that from getting harmed. So and the key components of risk management, I'll be talking more about them, is really identifying the assets, classifying these assets, assessing the risk to those assets, and then we'll talk about later prioritizing risk. Because what I want you to truly understand is we can never get to 100% safety. Never. Try to think about it. Try to create an environment where it's 100% safe. Okay, we've got a bulletproof car, right? Roll flat tires, and then something falls out of the sky and hits the car. It's rare, but it's still a possibility. You have a room in your house that's surrounded by 12 inches of concrete, 12 inches of seals, so of steel. You've got food, water, everything in there, and then the house burns down. The point is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the risk tolerable to whatever it is we're trying to protect, because we can never get to a zero risk situation. Never. So when we think about risk management, we have to figure out which risks are most likely to be the ones that are going to get you. And how do we prioritize? How do we treat those risks? Because you can't perfect it. You can't put 800 pounds of body armor on a soldier to protect them while they're out there, because they can't carry the 800 pounds of body armor long distances. So we can never get to a 0 point of whatever. So what we're trying to do is figure out what the most likely attacks are, how we protect against those attacks. We're planning on how we design a control to protect that organization, its people, its processes. So that's risk management. And I'm going to be teaching much more of that. Now, let's talk about the next component and why that becomes so critical is network security. Okay, I'm going to have fun with this when I actually teach this for all of you guys. And network security is everything that you do on the network. So your access control list, your security groups, your next generation firewalls, your intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. You're determining whose traffic goes first, whose traffic goes second, and if there's a worm or a DDoS attack, which traffic you actually drop. That's network security. And I'll be dealing much more with that. And network security is about, what's done on the routers, what's done on the switches, what's done on the firewalls, not giving you access to the network, for example, if you don't deserve to be. So that's going to be some fun. We're going to spend a good full day on that one. And that's most of my areas of expertise over the last 25 years in security. So we'll have fun with that. That'll be what we do on next week. But today we're going to focus on this third domain. Because if I went too deep into risk management, I promise you wouldn't love it. But these other things, you definitely will. So today, Isaac's going to cover identity and access management. Identity and access management is not a new concept. It's something we've used, and all of you are familiar with it. But we're going to bring it into the business concept. Identity and access management is determining who you are. Any of you ever been through an authentication process in your life to determine who you are? Give me your photo ID, give me your passport when you're trying to convert to security somewhere along the line. That's some flavor of who you are. You put your cash machine in, you enter your PIN code, and money comes out of the machine magically. All of that is determining who you are. And you have a card, something you have, something you know. And Frederick, there are no notes. I'm just speaking from years of experience. So, that's what we're talking about. So Isaac's going to get involved in the types of identity and access management because there's things that are different for customers versus users, how to determine who you are, how to determine what you're allowed to do, how to secure across clouds and all that kind of stuff. Isaac's probably the best person in the world to teach that, and that's what he's going to focus on today. Now, I'll be getting back into data security. Do we think data means anything now in today's world? Data? So let's say you've got all of this data and the data is your competitive advantage and then it's stolen, right? That'd be pretty terrible, right? Let's say you have all this data and you've got this new robot that can build houses and do everything and not make errors. It's really great. And then someone corrupts the data and all of a sudden the robot starts burning down houses instead of building houses. So data and data management is going to be critical, and we're going to have all kinds of fun with it. We'll talk about how to not keep data that you don't need anymore, because why keep something that could be used against you? We'll talk about how to hide data. We'll get involved. So, for example, you'll understand why when you log into something and you can only see the last four digits of your social security number or the last four digits of your credit card number. And we'll get involved in those types of data privacy techniques like obfuscation, tokenization, what have you. And we'll have some fun with that. We'll get involved in encryption and why we use encryption, whether encryption in motion, like as it's moving, encryption as it's stored, or potentially even a homomorphic encryption while it's actually in the compute. So we'll have some fun with that, and that's going to be another day that I'm going to cover that. And that's going to be another element that we talk about when we talk about security, especially data security. Now, we can have the best risk management, the best network security, the best identity and access management, secure our data, and then our software developers can write code that's not secure. Or pick up some bad code on GitHub and post it out there. The code's got a vulnerability and people can come in. So we'd be also talking about what it's going to take to create software, secure software. And I'll be getting into that when we get in that with regards to things like input validation and code checks and secure procedures, what have you. And then after that, we'll get involved in cryptography. Now, if we really look at cryptography, we've been using it forever. Cryptography is just making something that you know unknown unless you have a key. Posi Sisimita? Olanina Daxi? Now, that's a very weak form of cryptography because if another person spoke Greek on this call, they'd understand me. But it's still making it pretty hard to understand for many. If you're in the Caribbean, there are languages like patois that were actually spoken by the native people to protect them against people that wanted to do them harm. That's cryptography. If you go to Brazil, you'll notice a martial art called capoeira because the Brazilians were not allowed to practice martial arts, so they disguised it in a dance that looks like gymnastics. Still a pretty scary art, and that's just another flavor of cryptography. And we'll get involved in the types of cryptography, the strengths of cryptography, the weaknesses of cryptography, and all the cool stuff that goes involved with that. But I won't get to the PhD geek math level because I'm not a math person myself. I used to practice medicine in my youth. That's what I tend to know. And I've been an architect for about 25 years, but math, not my thing. So we're going to get involved in that. Now, the last part is physical security. Now, I don't know why, but tech people typically don't think of physical security. And I've literally been to environments where you plug your computer on, they've got the coolest security everywhere, and you're on the network and nobody even thought about it. Or you can just walk in the building and not be seen. Or you can manage to access some scary, important data center room where you could literally break everything. Or you could threaten one of the executives, and by threatening them to get into a secure place and make them do something. So we'll probably talk a little more about physical security than most people do because I've got a large background in physical security, executive protection, martial arts, and working with some other organizations that needed high security. And I think that's a really key component. So we're going to teach you how to think about physical security on one of these days as well. What goes into it? Even thinking about ingress points and egress points where you come into the building and leave the building and how the building could be approached. All of this is going to be important for security, and that's what we're going to be doing now. So I'm going to turn it over to Isaac to focus on identity and access management. Isaac has more expertise here than anyone. I think he was last working for one of the big three global banks. His last job is designing their zero trust and IAM strategy. So I'd love to teach this. I really would, because everybody that knows me knows I love to teach, but I feel like Isaac is better at it. And I really want to make sure that you get the best on this. So this is my friend Isaac. Isaac is an IAM architect. How many years are you an IAM architect now, Isaac?
Not 2 decades, for about 14, 15 years,
14, 15
Mike.
years.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. But
So,
obviously, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
no, I wanted to give some housekeeping notes, but I'll let you give an introduction about yourself after I give some housekeeping notes about how they how to approach the boot camp. So I'll talk about the unfun stuff after you talk about yourself for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, over 2 decades in IT. I started in 1999. My first project was working on a city of Johannesburg network architecture. We were doing a tech debt restructure. Very fortunate to land onto that thing. So we were doing a restructure more on the network engineering piece. We're moving things around. So my job was to redesign the IP address structure. So we did regular networking, which Mike will be talking about, and super networking, that kind of stuff. Obviously, this is the 2000s, early on, 2001, 2002. And then I went to spearhead another city in the area there where we were doing another restructuring there. And then about 14 years ago, I moved on to Phoenix, Arizona. I see somebody from Phoenix here. Hi. I had started doing IAM, Identity and Access Management. Now, at the time, we were mostly just doing stuff. Even I'm talking about the early 2000s, most things were just, you get a form or you come on, they give you like a piece of paper. You say, I want this access and this role, and your manager will give you stuff. And, the IT department will give you those access. And that's how these things used to work. And 14, 10, 15 years ago, things were slightly same, but we were trying to get automation. But many companies were custom building these products. So I was part of a team that custom built the product, then operations, administration. I came back as the architecture professional, basically just providing a migration strategy there in terms of how we're going to move from legacy, because we were in there, into something else, and then into consulting. You provide architecture, risk management, and all of the domains we're going to be talking about. And finally, my last one was doing risk assessments and specifically on the IAM architecture. Looking at that, looking at first level, meaning all the people working there, all the engineers, all the architects, looking at their risks, and then doing controls there. Chris, yeah, if you want to go back there, or I can continue.
Well, I didn't know if Mike had anything that he wanted to add in before I get to the housekeeping stuff.
Now, why don't you do the housekeeping? Let Isaac really dive deep into some really cool AWS concepts, including the types of IAM. Most people don't even realize there's more than one type of IAM. So I want everybody to really get that from Isaac.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Isaac and I will take it from here, and we'll see you on the next one. But before I get into the housekeeping, I do want to point out to everybody that Tyrone shared a link to our security architect webinar that we will be hosting on Monday night. If you've got any questions about the role of security architect, not so much the cybersecurity fundamentals stuff that we're going to be covering here, but the role of an architect, our security architect training program. If you've got any interest in that, any curiosity about the role, if you've got any questions about that, sign up for that webinar and join us on Monday evening. Also, if you're not able to attend, still sign up. You'll get sent the recording of it. So I just wanted to point that out. And now I will let Mike disappear for. But so before I let Isaac get into this, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping stuff. So I'm going to make an assumption that most of you have been through some kind of structured formal education, whether it be elementary school, secondary education, post-secondary education, some type of education setting. So just like any other class or any other course or any other training that you do, you're probably not going to get it the first time it comes out of my mouth, or the first time it comes out of Isaac's mouth, or the first time it comes out of Mike's mouth. And that is really the only reason why we send out the recordings, because we know you're going to need to hear it, you're going to need to absorb it, you're going to need to review it multiple times. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. It's gonna, and the reason I realized I didn't say this was because I started to see in the chat box people were making comments about taking notes, getting notes, talking fast, so on and so forth. Um, that's gonna that's gonna be the way this goes. Not that Isaac is going to talk 90 words a minute or 900 miles an hour, but it may take some time, or it may take a few iterations of you to review something to grasp it. So just keep that in mind. Give yourself that grace to know, okay, I may not get it the first time, but I'm gonna watch it again. Or make sure you have your make sure you got your notepad or your notepad on your computer, and make notes, either shorthand, longhand, whatever it might be, so that you know, okay, at the 30-minute mark, at 2:30 Eastern time, or whatever your time zone is, Isaac mentioned something. I have no idea what it is, but just make a short note so that you know when you watch the recording that that was that thing. You had a question about it. Because next week you may not remember that you had a question about it. But if you took a note, you're going to remember you had a question about it. Anyway, I could go on forever about the best way to approach something when it's your first time, but I just wanted to take a moment to do that, and set that expectation. Make sure everybody don't set yourself up for personal disappointment by thinking, okay, I got to get it right now. I got to get it this first time he says it. Just keep that in mind. So that's the housekeeping that I wanted to make, Isaac. And you probably agree with me. Uh, uh, but so keep in mind what we're going to do is Isaac's going to cover some material, um, 15, 30 minutes worth of material, find a stopping point, and then we'll pivot to some questions for a little bit of time. And we'll kind of keep that workflow. I may interrupt either Isaac or interrupt the question session if we need to move things along. So just be aware that that's my role. So you ready, Isaac?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
All right. Thank
You just let me know if you need
you.
anything from me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so like I was saying, we're going to be looking into that. So identity and access management was early on very different. Obviously, there's been an evolution. We're going to go through all types of identity and access management. And now some of the concepts were not always available, right? Some of the things that we're talking about were not always known. Um, some marketing information, but others have been around for the longest. For example, IAM as a core has been around for a while. Okay, so let's look and see. Let me just bring up my slides here. Don't worry, it's not going to be a lot of, I'm not going to kill you with PowerPoint. We're just going to do this real quick here. Um, just to bring this over. First, share my screen. Can you see the screen? You should see trees. Yeah.
We see your trees.
You see my trees. Yeah. Let me move this over. Okay. All right.
There
Here
we
we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the agenda today. Okay. So why does identity and access management matter? It matters because, as Mike was saying, lately, we were very perimeter focused. When I mean by perimeter focused, what I mean by that is I'm saying we're looking at the perimeter of the firewall, IDS, IPS, proxies. Those things are still important. So that's Mike's domain. So what has occurred is identity has become that new perimeter. It has become that new firewall. And you must have heard about it this week, Marks and Spencer in the UK, those from the UK. There was some social engineering and people's identity were compromised. Somebody calls in to pretend to be someone else, it's known as social engineering. I saw there's a new name, I think they call it vishing, where they trying to trick people into disclosing information. And this is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. What is IAM? IAM is basically we're asking the questions, who are you? Okay. Okay. Gabriel, Chris, you see the hand, or are we gonna wait until
Oh yeah, we're gonna wait
15
until we
minutes?
get through some of the content. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just wait about 15 minutes or so, and then we will share those experiences. Thank you. All right. So what is IAM? Basically, is we're gonna look at who are you, and obviously with IAM is you need to the first part of the identity piece is who are you, and can you prove it? And then the other piece is what can you do? Another area of IAM is another area is called IGA. So the first one is known as identity and access management. The second piece or the second component is known as identity governance and administration. It basically deals with the governance. It's basically saying, how do we manage who has access? You need some sort of a governor or a governance to do that. And the next one is called Privilege Access Management, or PAM. I think this is very important because this deals with the keys of the kingdom. How do we protect the keys of the kingdom? That's the kind of questions. So when you see these components, and these are the type of questions you need to think of. And the final one, which is getting a lot of steam, is CIAM, which is Consumer Identity and Access Management, or you can call it Customer Identity and Access Management. How do we scale? How do we scale identity for millions of customers, for example? How does Amazon do it? How does Sprouts and how does many of the public-facing institutions do it? Are they using? So that is why you can use any of these tools. So basically what we're trying to say is when you trying to solve a particular problem, you basically will be trying to use one of these tools to address that issue, for example. Okay, let's go to our notes here. So what are we saying? What is an identity? Okay. Basically, what we are saying is an identity involves a bunch of things, right? Identity involves basically, in an IAM perspective, an identity is basically user accounts. That portfolio, that profile. When you log on to, or when you're onboarded, or when you start a new company, or you basically, or work for an employer, you are basically given an identity, right? Regular users' identities, people who are so-called trusted in the organizations, they receive identities. And the identities obviously is based on their roles. We give them access to resources after being vetted and after being onboarded. Another type of identity is called contractors. Some people are there for a very short term or short period, called contractors. They're coming in, there's our contractors. Their job is to come and do a specific task, to do a specific project. They come in, and then they basically come in and work there as a contractor. But they get limited. They are not treated the same way as our regular users. Everybody knows. And the other third component of an identity, different type of users, we'll say, is what we call non-human accounts. Some of you are familiar with the non-human accounts. Non-human accounts, we're talking about service accounts, for example. We're talking about basically your system or your computer taking this. And typically in our environment, we try to assign people who work in organizations responsibility to own non-human accounts. Now, please note that the distinction between a regular account, which means you have a person in a particular department, you have somebody in the marketing department that they can do X, Y, and Z. We're going to get into that, but let's first deal with this particular issue. And then you have somebody who's a contractor. They have access to a particular project or systems. Sometimes they come through VM, and sometimes they come through federation, and we will discuss all of that. And typically what we do in non-human accounts, we assign users, we assign administrators, for example. If you are an administrator in your company, you will be assigned maybe or responsible for your non-human account. And the first thing to prove who you are is authentication. So many people are using passwords, and I know you are using passwords and to access a resource or particular system. The password is there to prove that you need to provide. You provide something that you obviously know. Mike mentioned that. And the way to do that is what we are currently doing is we are trying to move away from a password, basically. We're trying to move away from where you providing the username and a secret 16 character information that you provide to a system in order to gain access. What we are trying to do these days, we're trying to move away into more a passwordless type of system. Now, why are we doing that? Initially, what we were trying to do is we're trying to do, say, we provide my name, for example, I, Colancy, and then I provide my password 123, a very secure way of doing it. And then a few years ago, they've introduced, during the Biden administration, there was a executive order where they say all federal employees will have to use MFA. The MFA is basically just another factor of authentication. What we are saying is we saw a lot of credentials being getting stolen, and that is what we decided to do is to add another factor, for example, so that you can use that factor to in addition to your password. Sometimes it's weak, or sometimes it's people forget passwords. In addition to your password, we use a factor like an MFA thing. Your phone, you've seen the phone, for example. You've seen SMS codes. You've seen magic link, something that you send to that is sent to your email, for example, that you click on. That allows you to log in. But we are trying to move away. Now, let me make this clear. Now, if you're working for an organization where a password is kind of the big deal or the big thing that we are using, I would recommend that you try and move away from a traditional passwords. We're trying to move into something called a FIDO2 option. What we're trying to move now to, as you notice with the banks, we're trying to move into something called a passkey. A passkey is something that we use. Basically, you don't provide anything. You provide a key that you register. For example, if you're using a password manager like Bitwarden or some other tools that you can use, you use that key to log in, a FIDO key to log in into your system. If you don't want to use a key, you can actually use an actual physical key like a dongle, for example. You can, for example, look like something like this. This is not a dongle. This is just can you see this? This is just a USB, something like this. I hope I can see it. Here we go. Use a USB, basically. What would happen is you plug that in and then that particular dongle will allow you to log in. That is a much more secure way of doing it. So my prediction is we're going to be moving away from password maybe the next year or two, maybe 2026, 2027. Most companies, most banks have already started doing that. Those of you bank with some of the major banks in your countries or in the US, you'll see many people are trying to move away from the password system. Besides password, there's something else that we can use. So we're trying to replace, the reason why we're doing that is because we're trying to replace password with stronger phishing resistant systems, right? Phishing resistant credentials. Because I mean, if you think about it, what most of these guys are doing, for example, the Marks and Spencer attack, for example, the Jaguar attack earlier this year, what are they trying to do, right? They're trying to get you a password, and how are they going to do that? One way to do that, obviously, many people can't really guess these 16 or 18 character or 30 character passwords. What they do is, I think with Marks and Spencer, for example, which is, I think, is a clothing store. Those in the UK knows exactly what I'm talking about. Marks and Spencers, for example, what they try to do is they're trying to trick the help desk, right? So, or they'll trick the users. Somebody will be calling in pretending that, hey, I'm from some department, I'm from a particular group, or I'm a manager. Hey, can you please help me? Because I forgot my password. That's one way of doing that. And that's how easy to do that. But however, although we are moving away from the MFA, although we are moving away from the password thing, we're trying to get more into the MFA thing. Many of you guys are using the telephone, obviously your cell phone as your second factor. So the way you do that, obviously you know how this works. But let me tell you how they did it at Marks and Spencer. Very clever. You know what they did? They called something called MFA fatigue. What they did is they take away your SIM, call a SIM swap. They intercept your phone, basically. That's what they did. And then they start flooding the people. They start flooding the employees at the company with a bunch of please approve, 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 approve. And people get so tired of clicking on the approve piece. Let me just see if I can find um, you basically get so tired of getting the approve piece that after we giving an MFA fatigue, people starting to basically just compromise and get in. Can you see that? So there is always some way. If you can get somebody through social engineering, if you can get a help desk, for example, if you can get a person who's working at a front desk, and then you're trying to do them, or if you can take over somebody's phone, you can, in a sense, intercept that. It will be a little more challenging with password keys. All right. So another way to do that is, for example, with IAM is, so let me just again reiterate, if you remember, the IAM thing is trying to find out who you are and all that kind of stuff. And they're trying to find out what you can do. And IAM is primarily used internally for employees, right? For staff members. So one of the other safe way to do that, I mentioned passwordless. Web authentication is another way. We can also do FIDO keys. One of the best way to do, I believe, is to use a particular protocol called SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. Now, what SAML does, which is kind of a legacy protocol, right? It's kind of an older type of protocol. SAML allows you to, our employee, when you're logging in the morning, it allows you to log in. You log into a portal, for example, in the morning. Once you log in, that allows you to get some sort of an assertion, and that assertion allows you to log in, and you can use that session, that 8-hour or 12-hour session, to access other stuff. So many of you use that. So the protocol behind that is what's known as SAML. That's how it pretty much works. So you log in one time, and then you use a assertion, whatever you want to call it, token, whatever, assertion, that allows you to log into your other stuff. So you can log into Salesforce, you can log into ERP, you can log into HR system, you can log into the application that you're trying to do your work. Let me see if I have a diagram here to show you the flow of how SAML works. Just one sec. Let me just grab my SAML flows. 1 second. So SAML works in a triangular fashion. There are two ways to do that. You do something called an IDP authenticated flow, and then you get something called an IDP. In this case, obviously, will be our identity provider. And then you get something that you log in, basically. In the morning, you're logging in. So if you are on premises, let me put it this way. If you are on premises, you're logging into a portal or your intranet in the morning. That intranet, now, if you uncover the intranet behind the scene, that intranet is somehow connected to what we call an identity provider. What is an identity provider? identity provider is a platform or a tool that holds people's identity inside an organization. And I'll tell you how it ties into SAML in a minute. Okay. And then we got something what we call a service provider or a resource provider. So the idea that you get into the morning, that you get in every morning when you're trying to log in into any system is you're trying to authenticate through your Active Directory or your systems or your, which is also some sort of a identity provider. Once the company recognizes or acknowledges who you are, you've proven who you are, you've provided your 17, 18 character string or, combination of uppercase, lowercase numbers and special characters and your username. An identity provider or something in the back end will check and make sure that you actually work there. Once it has confirmed that you actually work there, it looks and see, remember the second piece is what is it you can do? It looks and see what can Fred Dungo do, for example, or what can Faiza do, for example, or what can Michael Gibbs do at my company? And that is what grants you access. And we'll get into all of that later on. And then once we've proven who you are and what you can do, it grants you access, but it doesn't just grant you access, but we're trying to get away from for you to log in or to be fatigued. Remember I mentioned the MFA fatigued? We're trying to get away from you logging in. Let's say, for example, you need to log into 5 applications to do your work. The idea is we're trying to cut down on the number of applications or your login sessions. And that is why we're introducing something called an identity provider. The identity provider allows you to log in. One time, we authenticate you one time, and then you use an assertion. Basically, the assertion proves who you are. Like, for example, I'm asserting my identity. I'm saying, hey, I am Clancy. Hey, I am John Smith. I can do X, Y, and Z. I'm allowed, not I can do, sorry. I'm allowed to do X, Y, and Z. That is compiled in what is called an assertion. Let me see if I can get my stuff up and running here. 1 second. And I'll show you how that works in the morning, how that works when you start your morning. So when you start off in the morning, you work with what is known as a identity provider, and then allows you to log in. Let me just share my screen real quick again, show you a basic flow. We are on number 1. Okay. Okay, I think I have the wrong one here. Let me just grab this. Okay. Let me just stop share real quick here. 1 second. All right. Seconds. Yeah, here we go. Share my screen. I'll open up the questions just now. All right, let's just put this over here. Can everybody see that flow?
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is the flow. You are the employee or contractor or whatever. You log into identity provider. You're trying to get to a resource. Your access is granted. And what is important after that? Once your access is granted, we have to log your activity. In this case, in IAM, the identity is acting as a gatekeeper. What is a gatekeeper? It makes sure that only verified users, remember we mentioned the passwords, you are able to provide your username and an 18 or to 20 string characters, and therefore you are identified, you are verified. And then we have another assertion or a token. Let's use the word assertion, and we got a token. And SAML, we call it a token. You basically give it a token. You don't have to provide a token. So what you do is you get for example, if you go to, you get an armband, right? Risk, you get with all your names, remember the assertion? You take that and you give it to the application. And then the assertion allows you to log in. Make sense? So user, IDP, application, access is granted. So the IDP each gives you the assertion, it gives you the tokens. You need some sort of a token. Like if you buy I use an example of when you go to a game or you go to a show, or a amusement park, you get what's called a wristband. This is kind of the same concept. Your wristband is the proof of who you are and what you can do. The identity or the box office is your IDP, where you buy the tickets, where you buy the wristband at the box office. Okay. That information, they have you, they've vetted who you are, they've checked you out. You don't have to worry, about doing it again. You only provide that one time. And that information is then instead of getting a password, we're making sure that we can get in. You get a token or you get an assertion, and that assertion allows you to log in. Okay? I think, Chris, that is it for now.
All right. So we'll take a break here for some questions. We may not have any at this time, but if we do, perfectly fine. I do want to suggest, for the sake of continuity and pacing, Isaac, if somebody does ask a question that happens to be something that you'll be covering coming up, just suggest that we wait until we cover that to see if they still have that question. Um, no reason to answer it now if we're going to be covering it 30 minutes from now.
Absolutely.
So let's see if there's any questions. I also saw that someone asked about the whole breaking schedule. So we don't have a hard and fast set schedule for breaks. It just really depends on the pacing of Isaac covering things and the way the questions grow. So we're going to try and pace it to where it's 15, 30 minutes of content, depending on how long it takes to cover different pieces and chunks. And then we'll break for 10 or 15 minutes to do questions, and then we'll start over again. So uh, let's see. So we'll just start reading some of these off. So Sandro says, so the JWT is a type of assertion? I
Yeah.
have no idea what JWT
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. The JWT is a type of assertion, is what we call token. It's called a JSON Web Token, or we can call it in short, a JOT token. That contains, what it does is it basically is your kind of an ID or a passport. It's obviously a little more than a passport, right? Obviously, the passport is for your ID, right? It tells you who you are. And obviously, the passport also tells you where you can go, which country you can visit. Kind of the same idea there.
Okay. I see Cam says they've got a question, so I'm gonna see if they can come off mute real fast. Let me see here. Let them ask their question.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Isaac, thank you for what you have shared with us. I'm having a hard time understanding why SAML is one of the best ways to protect identities. So I have this scenario. I go into a company, I authenticate, and I provide my token. What, how does that make the whole thing secure, given that somebody can hack into somehow hack into my identity, know exactly what my authentication is, and somehow figure out how to capture my token, and then all of the sudden them doing a lot of harm to that particular company I am in without even me knowing. So maybe I go on a break or or whatever the case might be, and then boom, they strike because now at that point Cam is somehow maybe in a meeting or I don't know. It's physically not on his desk, but that person can hit very hard within 5 or 10 minutes. So, question to you is how can you explain like why would SAML be or this approach be one of the best ways to protect identities?
Yeah. So the SAML thing takes care of the fatigue, right? Imagine it basically takes care of the login fatigue. If you're working on 10 applications, you have to remember 10 different logins or passwords for your applications. SAML takes care of that. And I'll address your token issue. Okay, so let me maybe just clarify the differences there. So SAML uses assertion. So the word SAML stands for security assertion markup language. Security assertion markup language. The token is the newer form of identity we're providing. It's a newer form of security, which uses JSON files. The JOT. Somebody will ask about the JOT. That's something else. I'll mention what that technology is called. Anyway, how is it saved? Remember in identity and access management, remember I mentioned the Joe Biden thing, the executive order. So for everything, every time you log in, you need to provide a second factor. So your company must make sure that you have another factor. So when I click on to log in initially, make sure you provide a second factor to do that. And how do you secure that? Those assertions. Okay, those assertions are all internal. SAML is primarily used internally in IAM, and most of our systems are IDPs or identity providers, or our IAM systems are pretty secure, are pretty locked down. Nobody can actually get in there. The only way to get in there is I mentioned, remember the Marks and Spencer um, example. I was saying earlier on that if they can get your credentials and if they can fatigue you with MFAs, remember you have those two factors. You have your password, something you know, and then you have another factor, uh, something maybe you have or whatever. One way to do that is to maybe fatigue you with MFAs, but you have to provide another factor. So in other words, nobody can log into your account without you providing maybe this thing, yeah, and not your phone. They shouldn't be able to log in. Or if it's the server, right? If you are an administrator, you're logging into a server, make sure you have this thing, right? A dongle. So without a dongle, they can't log in. Although they have your credentials, they need something else. They have your credentials. Sorry, they need something else, your phone. Make sense?
It does. It does. Uh, I think the hacking the credentials is the easy part. I think
Yes.
this second authentication is where we are making or trying to make it very difficult for the
Yes.
hacker to kind of do the harm they need. I'm trying to zoom in on the second one. Can because they're so smart, they always find creative ways to find that, it's the second MFA. So let's say they were able to do something where they're able to see the messages that I get on my phone.
And you
And
got
I'm
tired of
using
seeing those messages. Yes.
or hey, it's
Yeah.
it's Microsoft Authenticator. Hey, press
Mm.
confirm it's you. So what if they're able to do the same thing, kind of cloning my phone somehow?
Yeah,
Then
they
what do we
must do
do?
two things. They must steal SIM swapping. They must infiltrate that and do that. And that is why they must be able to do it. And it can be done. And I'm not saying, like, for example, we have all of these things already. I mean, for the last 20 years, we've been doing all these things. I mean, look what happened if you go back to Jaguar. Look what happened to Marks and Spencer. Look what happened there. They were still able to get in. They can't really get in your credentials, but they can social engineer you, basically. First,
Yeah, yeah. I'm just gonna move us on along here so that we can get to some other questions.
can we get, yeah, more questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
Uh,
bringing that question in, Cam.
Yep. Thanks again,
Really
man. Appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.
Thank you.
So Sharon asks, a token is similar to a temporary permission.
Yeah, a token is similar. A token is like a passport, obviously, like I mentioned. Token, has your information. It says, who are you? Remember, the idea of IAM is three things, right? Who are you? What are you allowed to do? And where have you been? We need to track and log your activities. That is the idea of IAM. So what does a token do? A token acts, your token or your assertion answers two questions: who you are, where you're allowed to go. Token is who you are, what you're allowed to do.
All right. And another question someone asked was, who's exchanging the tokens? Who does it go between?
Okay. Um, Let me just bring up mine. That's a good question. Who's exchanging the token? The exchange is done by the system. Um, there's a system called an IDP. Okay, let me just mention the vendors. So we have a bunch of vendors that they're into this business. SailPoint and Savient. So they are IDPs. They issue these things. Or Okta, they give you these things, these tokens. They give it to the application. You must consent. Remember, your role as a user is, hey, I'm giving permission to do this. That's why you click. That's why you click on Salesforce. That's why you click on the ERP. That's why you clicked on the HR system in the first place. By clicking on that application, you say, "Hey, I am choosing this application." Okay, and I'm telling my IDP, I'm clicking on this application. I'm choosing Chris. He's the IDP, and sorry, he's the app. I'm choosing this person or this app. I'm trying to access this app, and then something else says, hey, let me check, are you allowed to do that?
All right. So our next question. Oh, Sharon. We'll let Sharon ask her question. And I've got one more from the chat box before we move on. Hey, Sharon.
Isaac and Chris. The question that I had about the token being similar to permission, is it just temporary? Say, for instance, it's given you, whether it's a human or an application, just temporary, like a couple of days, how many days, but after that, it get expires.
Absolutely, yeah. You want to do it for hours. You want to make it short, just for a few hours. Maybe just as long as you work, maybe a 10-hour span. You get something called a session, and then for a duration of you being there, and then we make sure they expire. But they must be issued every morning or every day by the IDP.
Um, so the next question, I think it might carry us on into the next part of your content. Um, where did it go? I lost it. What's the difference between authentication and authorization, and why is it important to separate them?
Absolutely. That's a great question. The difference between authentication and all questions are wonderful. They're appreciated. Authentication obviously is you must prove who are you. You have to provide your credentials by doing that. The authorization is what are you allowed to do? And remember, again, let me repeat one more time. So there are two things. So SAML uses assertions. Inside your SAML assertion, it answers those two questions. Who are you and what can you do? Not what you can do, sorry. What are you allowed to do? Remember this, somebody has to approve these things at your company. You're not allowed to go everywhere you want. Go into your house. Basically, you enter your house, your authentication is your key, you unlock the door, and then you go to the kitchen. You're only allowed to go to the kitchen as a contractor. The kids can go to the bedroom, but the contractor cannot. The kids in this case are the employees. They can get everywhere, but they also have restrictions. Your visitors or your contractors cannot open the refrigerator. They're not authorized to do that.
I wish it was that simple sometimes.
Yes.
All All right. You ready to move on with the content? And
Yeah, I
we
don't know.
can
Depends on the yeah, we can these are the little bit of a more little tougher ones. So I'm ready to go on, but
yeah,
yeah,
we can go on. We'll
absolutely.
come back to questions again
We
in
can
another.
always come back to this. Yeah.
Yeah,
If there's
yeah,
any other I understand this is I mean it took me a while to consume this. I remember the first time I heard of SAML
yeah.
back in 20 whatever. I don't remember now.
And
Yeah.
remember, everyone, even if we don't happen to get through all the questions, we are keeping track of them offline, so that we're going to provide some type of like question repository. Well, not just question, but answer repository for any questions that are shared in the chat box that we might not be able to get to. Um, so we'll let Isaac get back to the content, and then we'll break again in another 15 to 30 minutes. Just depends on how the
Time is
flow
the travel
goes.
call. All right. Okay, so far so good. All right. So that is SAML. Is everybody okay? Just the thumbs up. Everybody understand SAML uses assertions because we're going to go to another technology. Yeah. Everybody knows what an assertion is. Great. Assertion is straightforward. And I threw in the word token there for a reason, just not to confuse you, but to and I mentioned SAML as a legacy application. It's a legacy thing that you use, meaning it supports the older applications that you have in your system and your network. There's another form of authentication. It's called OIDC. OIDC. OIDC uses tokens. Okay, and everybody's been asking about tokens. They use tokens. So OIDC is what uses tokens. OIDC is the first standard or this first protocols. Now, these are all called protocols. Protocols is how we communicate, how systems communicate with each other. So I speak a particular language, I speak French, and you speak French. I would say that'll be a protocol, right? English is a protocol, everybody understands. Leo speaks Portuguese. I need a translator in between, I need something else. So obviously, we're not kind of the same protocol there. Um, okay, so OIDC is an interesting authentication method. Okay, that is used for the modern applications. If you have a modern applications, you're using OIDC, but it is actually started off as OAuth, Open Authorization 2.0, 2.1. The open authorization, as the name suggests, it's for authorizations, for example. You're authorizing things to access to that. Okay? OIDC does authentication. OpenID Connect. It does the authentication piece. So the way they've structured is they've built OAuth, which is the authorization piece, and on top of the OAuth protocol, they use OIDC for authentication. Again, authentication, and they use what we call JSON tokens. You saw the name there. JWTs, JSON Web Token or OAuth token. What does SAML use? Let me go back quickly to SAML. SAML uses what's called assertions, but they're written in a XML format. XML almost looks like HTML. I don't know if somebody's seen it. Yeah, it almost looks like that. But they use XML. OIDC uses JSON. Okay. And the currency for me to give you access to an application for OIDC, the currency is called tokens. That's it. Similar concept, similar way the way it works. I want to get to an applications that is protected. So if you think about it this way, if I need to protect my applications, if I need to protect, for example, my high valued applications, I have IP, intellectual property in a database somewhere. I have database one. Again, I'm going to use the same example again. I forgot the gentleman's name who asked that question. But anyway, I have a database there and it speaks OIDC. I have a database 2 that speaks OIDC, I say speaketh, that speaks OIDC as well. I have all of these high valued access, and inside my storage account, and I have an S3 bucket, right? The storage account. Everybody knows what S3 bucket is, a storage account in AWS, or just a storage in Azure. It's all internal. Nobody can see it from the outside. In order for me to protect that, I need this IDP thing in front of it. In other words, I'm saying, Sharon, if you want to get to my storage device, I want you to first check in with the IDP. And the IDP says, hey, I know about Sharon. Sharon is good here. Sharon can access this information, this S3 bucket. Sharon can access this. I'm sorry to use a name, Sharon. I'm not going to ask you any questions. Sharon, because I can see your face, you and Collins, and thanks for those on the camera. Sharon can access this database, but in order for Sharon to access this database, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do a token. I'm going to give Sharon some sort of a token. I'm going to write it down here. The way they do it, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to do this. Let me just move this out of the way. I'm going to be doing this. Is it upside down? Can you guys read it? It says token. Sharon gets this. He issues an ID. I know Sharon's name is on there. And there's a role. Sharon can do this. Can Sharon read on a database? Who determines that? The IDP determines that, because before you went onto the database, you already got permissions. Okay, can Sharon do this? Can she read in the database? Yes, we look at the roles. And that's how we're going to get into RBAC, role-based access control. Inside the gatekeeper, our IDP, we have a bunch of roles that determines Sharon's access, that determines Colin's access. Okay? Sharon can only read the database. She cannot make changes. Okay? In AWS, so those who are in the cloud, they call them policies. They call them permissions. And when we bundle these permissions or policies together, they call roles. But since Sharon is an accounting department, we want to create a role for her called accountant, senior accountant. And that is what we call roles-based access control. And then what we do is we are authorizing, no longer authenticating, we are authorizing Sharon to access the database. But every time Sharon needs to do something, she has to check with our gatekeeper, which is our IDP. We look at the roles, we look at the permissions they can do. We see what Sharon or whoever or James is allowed to do. Whatever James is allowed to do is based on a role-based access control. Now, why are we using role-based access control? We are using role-based access control so that we can mirror. So if we have a senior accountant called Sharon and we're getting Collins, senior accountant number 2, all we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate or mirror the roles or the applications or the permissions. Whatever Sharon is the standard, she's our template now. We're gonna mirror this access to what our next account is gonna look like. Why do we do that? Because otherwise, think about it. If you have 15 of these people, or 20 of these people coming in, we have to every time get into the IDP to the gatekeeper and say, hey, give this person permission 1, 2, 3, 4, read databases, write databases, read databases. And we don't want to do that. We want to do some sort of a role called a senior accountant. And anybody with their title, okay, will inherit that, and they will get those roles or those permissions. They will be able to get that role and that permissions, and that role they will use to access our database. But the rules will be the same. You can make a distinction between Collins and Sharon. We can say we can give Collins the right access. For example, we can change a line in our permissions and say, hey, for database 3, for this table, Collins can execute. For whatever reason, the company decides to do that. We can do that. It can be done. And that's how we get away with this. Because we don't want to repeat the idea in cybersecurity and IT in general, or in programming. We don't want to keep on redoing the same things over and over. Everybody says fatigue, right? You don't want to keep on doing the same things over and over again. You want to make sure that you have a template. That's your first thing. Get your template right. Engineer your template. Make sure it is properly architected or engineered. We call it role engineering. Role engineer it properly. Give the proper permissions. And then we give you access. But here's the beauty. What we can do is when Collins, senior accountant number 2, joins our company, we can give them what's called birthright access. What are we saying? We're saying, hey, when accountant number 3 comes on, we're no more experimenting now. They are born with this role. They get birthright access. They are birthed with this into the company. And when he starts on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock, by 9 o'clock, all access is granted because we're smart enough to do that. What used to happen in the past was, like I mentioned, Collins would fill in a form, gives it to his manager, manager signs off, ticks off on a piece of paper, I want this role, this role, this role, this role, sends it to the manager's manager, they approve it, it says, nope. And then by Wednesday or Thursday, they're still waiting and they're going back and forth with a piece of paper or emails. And then 2 weeks later, they have all the access. And that is why the gatekeeper comes in, our IDP. Our IDP can control that stuff and force that. Not enforce it. We're not in enforcement yet. We are gatekeeping now. And I'm going to show you how IGA comes in. But we'll discuss that just now. All right, so let's see, where are we? I think that should be clear. So then what we do then next is we basically, so we've dealt now with 2 things. You authenticate, you prove who you are, and then we authorize. What you're allowed to do. And we mentioned OIDC, we mentioned OAuth. OAuth does the thing. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention. We also mentioned the fact that we do role-based access control. Now, let's say, for example, we want to be more granular. So now we have this role-based system that we're using for giving people, we're authorizing, right? Remember, we think of role, we think of authorization. We can actually be more granular. There's something called ABAC. Attribute, what is your attributes? Date, time, month, whatever. Attribute-based access control. So you can also use the person's attributes. Every person in every company has attributes. They got your salary scale, grade 13 or grade 12, whatever your income you get from your HR system assignments. You get your job functions that you do, you got your job titles, you get your location, you are located maybe in New York or Lagos, or you are located in London. That's an attribute. So we can even refine it and be more granular. People in Lagos get this based on the attribute. People in London get Y. People in Johannesburg get Z. People in Sao Paulo get this, etc., etc. Those are all your attributes. All right? And that's called authorization. And those things can be written. But this is, if you notice, attributes are more granular. What happens with attributes? They become so granular that it's overwhelming. It's too much. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of things we need to do. There's a lot of attributes we need to collect. It's a lot of paperwork. So role-based is easier to do, but attribute is actually, it's much more granular and much more secure. All right. Okay, so let's just move on and see here then. What we can do then is there's another thing that we can do. We can go into policies as well. Now, in many, many companies, there are many, many policies. Other policies are stating, obviously, people are coming in and out of companies. The policy could be like a dress code. Some people have that policy. A policy could be contractor policy, maybe. We can say, let me think of a policy that I had at one time. A policy that I had was to do with, oh yeah, I remember this policy now. That was an interesting policy. Back 10 years ago, there's a very popular policy. There's something called exempt and non-exempt, but don't worry about the terms. Those who are in the HR will know what I mean, meaning that those who are hourly and non-hourly people. Okay, so we used to have this policy. If you, basically what we're saying is, if you're a hourly employee, you can't log into the email system. You can't get into your emails after 5 o'clock. Because in some companies, logging into an email is actually work, you know? So we need to tie that down. That's a policy, right? They have their policy. So even if you're working remote, you can't get in. So you can actually call it that. So the way to control that is to using what we call a policy-based access control. A policy-based access control. You use the policy to control the access. You can use the attribute to control the access. You can use a role to control the access. All to do with authorizations. All right. So let's just see here. So what do you think, Chris? I think I'm ready for the next question. There's a lot of stuff here. I want to tie in what Mike was talking about. Mike spoke on confidentiality. Mike talked about integrity, and Mike spoke about availability. So
Yeah,
our IAM system needs to work together. Our IAM system needs to support what we call the CIA triad. That is what Mike was touching on. Mike touched on, confidentiality, IC, and I integrity, and obviously A availability. And if you remember, just a quick refresher, we want to make sure that we protect for confidentiality, we protect sensitive information. How do we do that? In the IAM world, we protect sensitive information from unauthorized access. And that is why we're so strict in our policies. And that's how we're so strict in our roles. That's how we're so strict in our attributes. I see you are off mute, Chris.
Yeah.
I want to tie in the CIA triad real quick.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. I couldn't tell. My speakers broke up. I couldn't tell if you were asking to stop or if you were saying that you were going to stop in the near future. So.
Oh no, I'm gonna as soon as I tie in with Mike.
Okay.
So I want to move on
Gotcha.
to the IGA piece, but I want to just tie in the CIA triad real quick, the confidentiality piece. Let's all put it together. Mike spoke about. We'll try and do that in every of our 4 domains, our 4 components of IAM. How does this tie in IAM to the confidentiality piece? The purpose of IAM and confidentiality is, let me tell you, the idea is you want to provide strong authentication, okay, to protect against unauthorized access, because you want to keep the confidential stuff confidential. We want to do stringent authorization control, roles or attributes or policies to make sure that we don't allow unauthorized people. So here's the idea again. Let me see. So strong authentication, MFA, and then risk-based, and then we're going to protect our sensitive data from unauthorized access. And how we do that in integrity, we maintain authorization policies and role-based policies to ensure that only people, remember I mentioned the Sharon example, changing stuff in a database. Remember Mike was saying if you changing the zeros something in a bank account, The integrity piece, you remember that, right? So if you have a policy that says you cannot do that in a bank, so for example, if customer information in a big bank located in some sort of a banking system, only authorized people are allowed to do that. And that is why we're using PBAC, policy-based access control. And that is how we're using role-based access control to ensure only actions. In other words, if you tie the authorization piece to the integrity piece, we are saying authorized people can do X, Y, and Z based on a particular attribute. That's what we're saying. I mean, if you think about it, how are we going to prevent somebody from changing things or changing medication, for example? For example, somebody sneaks in at the back, one doctor sneaks in, we don't have an IAM system. They go in and they make changes, like Mike liked to use the medical example. Or somebody goes in and changes, zeroes out your account. But that person has to have the authority to do that. Somebody has to have some sort of roles, right? And let's tie it back to the last day in accounting, the logging piece. And when somebody goes and changes something in your bank account, let's say they are authorized to do that. Let's say, Collins is authorized to do that. But how do we know Collins did it? How do we go back and do forensics in that? The logging piece. Remember, IAM is 3 A's, right? Authentication, authorization, and accounting. So if Collins goes out and makes changes to the account, we have a log, we have his footprint, we know he was there. He can't deny it. He can't say, I didn't do it, because we can show logs and see we can do it. We take those logs, we hand it over to forensics, and that's why they can do forensics and go in. And that is where you come in as an IAM architect. You come in and you provide that information. And you must make sure that you have that, what we call a control, right? You have that piece, that last leg of information in to make sure that we can track people's activity. If anybody changes. Remember, we strengthen with our authentication. We enforce integrity with our policies, with our authorization. What about availability? We want to make sure that the system is resilient, make sure the system is always available. Make sure our SSO and our federated systems are always secure by using redundant systems. We want to make sure we do that all times. And another way to think of it, those who haven't thought about it in a different light, if you think about availability, I think it's very important. Imagine you run a bank, and on Tuesday, people can log in. Wednesday, the banking website is down. Remember, Amazon was down, sorry. AWS was down last week. Oh, that was a big one. I'm an AWS customer, and everybody hears I got Amazon Prime, I got the whole thing. Availability issues. Now they have to explain. Imagine your bank, back to my banking example. Imagine your bank on Tuesdays off, Wednesdays kind of working, and every Friday afternoon is on and off. It only works until 12 o'clock. And that is why the second A is so important. That's why you must have a resilient SSO. And it ties in because you must be able to log in with our credentials. And that's how the authentication piece comes in. And that's how we want to make sure that whenever we build our IAM system, we have a redundant system in place and it's always available. Now, there was an interesting hacking group, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. They used to wear these masks, I forgot what they're called. They used to do silly things, a bunch of kids. One day they messed around with one of the opponents. What they did is they ordered like 500 pizzas and they delivered it at this guy's house in the morning before the guys get to work. And instead of going to work, yes, he couldn't open the door obviously in the first place. What he had to do there is just to go ahead and basically, remove these these pizza boxes out of the way, and obviously he couldn't get out of his house. In other words, his access out of the house was unavailable because these guys decided to keep him busy. Instead of working, he was moving pizza boxes out of the way. So that's how they do it with availability. So they can give you like SSO sessions, SAML sessions. They can give you tokens continuously instead of people logging into their regular job like Salesforce or ERPs, your Oracle ERPs. This thing is busy working with hackers, giving them tokens and requesting stuff, and therefore the thing is not available. All right, so let's see. I think that's it for IAM. And any questions? I hope you guys enjoyed it. Before, let me just first quickly, let me just quickly wrap up. Let me just say it again. Um, the users try to log in, they get redirected to the whatever, the IDP, you authenticate, you get an assertion, and then you granted access. You want to make sure that system is always available, that flow is available. Over to you for questions.
All right. Now, do we have any additional content after this, Isaac? I just want to
Yeah,
try and...
we're wrapping up. We're going to go to the IGA piece. We're done with the IAM piece.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out my pacing. Okay, we'll get to some of the questions here. So, first one we've got that's related to the most recent content. So can you explain the principle of least privilege with a real world example?
Oh, the principle of least privilege. Okay, there's ways of explaining it. So if you have a token, okay? If you have a token, if you can see my token, where's my token? If you have the token, the principle of least privilege is you're going to scope down your privilege, your token, to only give you access to resources that you need. For example, once you get your token to log in, make sure that the token only is scoped to only areas that you're allowed to access. You don't give broad access.
All right. So our next one is going to be in role-based access control, should all permissions needed by a user be included in a single role, or is it better to create multiple roles assigned under a hierarchy?
You can do that. You can do a hierarchical system, or you can, I would prefer doing multiple things because you don't want to have too many roles, obviously, because then people become fatigued. Remember, those roles have to be approved every quarter by someone, your manager, for example. So maybe just trim it down a little bit and have some sort of a maybe a hierarchical system. It depends on what the company wants to do. But the idea is you want to make sure that you have multiple roles for different functions. But keep it small. And the other idea of RBAC, guys, is to make sure that you don't have people having excessive access. But it's easy, what we call role creep, right? It's easy to go over your roles in RBAC. It is very, very easy to do. And that's how the next one, IGA, is coming in.
Now, the next question is, how does rule-based access differ from attribute-based access?
Okay, the role is basically your role, like I said, your senior accountant, right? And then you have a bunch of policies. Policy says, for example, access to SailPoint, access to this, access to ERP 1, 2, and 3. The attributes is basically based on your attribute, your name, first name, last name, location. What else? What did I say? City, Sao Paulo. Location, it's obviously Sao Paulo. What else? Your function and different attributes that you have in your profile. Remember, you get a profile when you join in IAM. Your profile consists of these attributes.
All right. And I do see Eladi's hand up, but I'm going to get through a couple of more questions from the chat box and we'll get to her. So can you please explain about DDM, dynamic data masking, as another way to protect sensitive data if you have time?
Yeah, the data masking is basically what we do is DDM is, I think, what's his name? Chris Michael's going to speak on that one and data management.
Yeah.
DDM is basically the masking part is, although you are authorized, let's tie it to IAM, right? Although she's authorized to access the data, okay? But because, there's a caveat to that, right? Because Nelly or because Sally is from the help desk, Sally can only see the last four of the social. Because we masked it for the help desk people. Why? They don't need to see the people's full social. There's no need to do that. But here's another example. Let me give you the other one. Because Henry is in HR director, when they log into the same database, they can see the full Social Security. We're not masking for them. So we have different policies there. Clear?
Right.
Authorized and masking. DDM. So that's a very clever question. Somebody's tying in data management and IAM. That's great.
All right. So you mentioned passkeys. Are these similar to certificates used with PKI?
Yeah, that's different. Passkeys are used slightly different. Certificates is another way of doing it. Certificates, you need a PKI infrastructure, public key infrastructure. Certificate are also very secure. You can also use it. It's just another form of authentication. I didn't mention. I'm glad you bring that up. So it's passkeys, passwordless keys, FIDOs, certificates, username and passwords, MFAs, that kind of stuff. It's just another form of authentication. Great question. Thanks. And I like the masking question as well. Somebody's jumping ahead.
All right. Let's see what Aladi has. Let me see if they can come off mute. And then we'll get back to the ones in the chat box.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, hello, thank you so much for the class. So my question is in regards to the role-based, attribute-based, and policy-based access control. Based on the example that you gave to us, which was quite interesting, would you say that if based on an employee can have different attributes in an organization, right? So with the policy-based example that you gave, which is like, oh, those that are hourly paid, can that be an attribute and kind of fall under attribute-based access control and not necessarily policy? That's my first question. In a way to say what's the difference between policy-based and attribute-based. And then the second question is, for a more robust security, would you say some big enterprise would carry out the three all together? Can the three be done together
Yes.
to properly secure the enterprise?
Yeah, you can do that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. You can do that. So the attribute is obviously, like I mentioned, your attribute that you have, and the policy depends on you. So the attribute will be exempt, non-exempt in your profile, and your policy will dictate the type of access. What is the other part of the question? Is it let me first, is that what you were asking? Just to understand.
Yes, in a way. Yeah. Yeah, so the second question was, can we do the three? I mean, is it one or the other, or can the three be done together?
Yeah, you can combine them. Exactly. So you have a role, accounting, and inside the role, you can break down the attributes, and then you can have the policy if the person is, for example, is Collins is just is exempt person or non-exempt person. You can stipulate the attributes, and then inside those attributes, again, like I said, you can stipulate what time you can work based on the roles that it has on the top. So top, like a hierarchy system. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
But that's a lot of work. These stuff takes, let me just say, this stuff takes months, over a year to do sometimes, just to put it together and to get it right. You're not going to get it right the first time.
No. Good question. And that what you just said, Isaac, goes to the heart of the whole architecture process. Is it worth it? The cost benefit analysis, is the time, the budget, all that stuff. Is it worth it to do the three, or maybe just two, or just one, or whatever? You answered a question earlier with a long version of my favorite answer. My favorite answer is always it depends. It always depends on different things. So we've got a few more questions from the chat box I want to get to, and then we can keep moving if no more come in. So where are these access roles and rules authored, and how does the system implement it?
It's in our gatekeeper, right? Our IDP. The way the system implements it is every time you trying to do something, what they call a policy engine. Okay. So every time you're trying to do something, every time in any organization, if you're bypassing the gatekeeper, then you got a problem. Every time you're trying to access something or do any function, you must be approved, or the gatekeeper must look at your permissions. You must go through a policy engine to evaluate your actions. Once the policy engine approves or evaluates what you can do, and then you can do it in your IDP. And you can just, as an admin, you log in there and then you put together your rules there, basically.
All right. So I've only got one more question. So if anybody's got any more, you can pop them in. So I just wanted to pop on screen and encourage anybody to ask those questions. So our next one is going to be, and I have no idea what these letters mean, so hopefully you get it, Isaac. Could you go over DAC and MAC as well in terms of real life experience?
Well, in terms of real life, discretionary attribute, those are a little older. I haven't used that in many, many years. I have not planning to talk on that because we're kind of moving away from mandatory and discretionary access control. Mandatory and discretionary. D is discretionary, M is for mandatory. I have not used that extensively because by the time that's kind of the older way of doing it. Time I came into the scene, believe it or not, most of the companies or the places that I worked with, we moved away from that particular type of access control.
All right. Well, that's all for now. So if you want to move on, we can.
Yeah, it depends on you guys. You want to move on or? Yeah, let's go to the next thing.
Arthur, looks like Arthur waited till the last second, so we'll see. We'll see what Arthur has, and then we'll keep moving. Hey,
Great
Arthur.
stuff. All right, let me just go ahead, sorry.
Sounds like good stuff. I just wanted to ask, in the industry now, what are the main software tools? Because as people are looking for jobs, it looks like knowing the tool is the key to getting the job. And before, you knew the theory and the understanding, it was good enough. You learn on the job. Now, if your resume doesn't have that tool, I mean, you're not getting past that resume ATS. So I know SailPoint is one. Can you point out maybe ones you know of that you're seeing?
Savient is another. So SailPoint is what we're going to go into next. Okay, so the IAM, here's a caveat. Here's the thing I did not know, very well, which I discovered much later in my career. The way they've done it these days is they do it like this. They're saying Okta is what you need to know. Okta deals with IAM. This is what I was referring to. Okay. You talked about SailPoint. SailPoint deals with IGA, and we're gonna get into that. That's a great way of asking the next question. IGA. Yes, they want you to know that. So in terms of IAM, here's the tools. Ping Federation or Ping Fed or Ping Identity. Okta. Auth0. I think Okta and Auth0 belongs to the same company. What's the other one I worked on? ForgeRock. So I worked on maybe two ForgeRock, and I worked on Ping. So yes, they want you to know these things. That is called IAM. Okay. And the IGA, I might as well mention because we're going to get into that one. IGA, there are two major players in this space. SailPoint and Savient is the other one. They are what we know as IGA tools. So identity, governance, and administration tools. And I'm going to share it in a minute now. Answer the question?
Right.
Other?
I can't find Arthur. Let me see, just to see if, how do I spell Arthur? There he is. All right. Did that answer it, Arthur?
Yeah. If at some point, if you could type it in, so maybe people will realize. Because I'm noticing, I've seen some guys get jobs just by knowing SailPoint and say Okta, and I was
Yeah.
like, wait, how is this? You know, but it looks like knowing these tools. This is for everybody. You go take the courses on the tools. You know,
Yeah.
the theory here. Go take a course on the. There's little courses out there for SailPoint. Just have even a certificate. It'll help you get in.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what's a,
Like
yeah,
like
you know
like
what's
Mike
a,
always says, get
yeah,
that knowledge and then go get the thing that proves it and
yeah.
use that to get your foot in the door. Absolutely.
You know what's the other problem with that is um there is many of these tools have these tiers. So you start off with first have an associate, professional, and expert level, and then as an architect. You must go through these tiers, and then before you get to the next tier, they want you to have some sort of experience.
Yeah, yeah. We have one more question come in, so we'll do that one, and then we'll let you keep going. I like this one. From Said says, "What are the principles of IAM, role-based access control, versus attribute-based access control?"
The principles, the other one is broad access, slightly
Mhm.
broad access, and attribute is a little more granular access. Broad access, RBAC, ABAC is granular. You can be really, and the moment you go granular, there's a trade-off, right? Time versus money, etc. You have to go through. If it's a big organization, it might be a challenge. So you can actually target a sector of the company and then let them do ABAC, and the other general population can do RBAC. Broad versus granular. That's kind of the principle there.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you get back to teaching us some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to the next one. Um, I just click on this one. Let me just bring this over. I hope this time it works. Me and IGA, SailPoint, Savient. How do we manage US access? That's the question. And this is the flow. Remember the other one was? Okay, let's first go through this flow. The user logs in to the IGA portal. This is the access most common way of dealing with it. The IGA portal redirects the user to the manager for approval, and then application owner approves, and then an application is granted. That's kind of the high level flow. All right, let's get into it. Are you guys ready? Okay, so IGA basically deals with lifecycle, compliance, and audit. That is what it does. So the IGA has something called identity lifecycle. You have something called joiners, movers, and leavers. Now, what are those? Now, the joiners are the people who join the company. Um, the the leavers are the people who are leaving or no longer with the company. And then you get your folks who are basically moving the company, moving around, getting promotions, et cetera, et cetera. So the IGA handles that. Let me just see if I can bring a diagram here. 1 second. Let me just do this real quick here. Find a place. Just 1 second. Import from device. JML. My JML. Yeah, I mean, this is what you get. Okay. And I'm going to bring up another tool. 1 second. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Second here. Share. You can see my screen, right? Okay, let's
Not yet, Isaac.
Oh, you can't see it yet? Okay. Obviously, I didn't click share yet. My sickness with Zoom, sorry. All right. Okay. So there we go. So let's go. Okay. So let's see here. We have these blows here. Here. And then we have this flow here. Why is this thing in a way? And then basically that's the basic flow at high level. Okay. Okay, and then we do okay. Okay, once you click on this. Oh, geez. When this product does this, I don't know. For some reason, it's not working. Oh, no. Okay, I'll fix this. There we go. And then we go this way, and then we go this way. The idea is basically you get a joiner. That's pretty straightforward. Let me just put on caps. Everybody can see, right? We have a joiner, and then we have the birthright access we mentioned already. And then we have our mover. That's pretty much it. Mover, and then we have our access reviews. And this is kind of the flow of what we do in this area. And then people leave the company. That's it. Okay, so the most important thing about here is everything is important, right? So the purpose of this one, so the purpose of the birthright access is primarily for convenience. Okay, we mentioned that we bundle our roles together. Okay, and then when people move, every time a person moves, we want to make sure that we do some sort of an access review. Even if they're not moving, all of these roles that we have needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. Now, what determines the review process is the type of access people have. There are regulations in terms of HIPAA, SOC, depending if you're in a financial industry or a healthcare industry, or depending on in a highly regulated industry, like, for example, utilities, power and all that kind of stuff. Access reviews are there to make sure that you don't have a headache. The headache is basically, I don't know whether Sally still needs this role in accounting. I don't know that. I don't know if they're still supposed to be having the proper access. So therefore, all roles have to be reviewed at all times. And then when a person leaves, very, very important, the IGA systems ensures that this process works. When somebody leaves, you want to make sure that that person's access is cut almost immediately. Now, there are two ways of cutting an access. You can disable the account. The way that works is HR comes in. Basically, they disable the account. HR is known as the source of truth, for example, in our systems. And then what happens is once the account is disabled, the information is fed down to our IGA system because it does access control. And then once the information is fed down to the IGA system, and in some places, you will have an Active Directory tool. And then what we have is, in some places, you have the connection there. And then what you have then is, you want to make sure that access is also removed from applications. This is what you want to do. So HR is a source of truth. And everything that occurs, it must be approved or done by HR. So if user comes in, they get to the AGA, IGA, and we have a little triangle here. Sorry. We have a little triangle here. We can go to there, and then we can go to our applications at all times. Remember the roles, RBAC. This is where you can do your RBAC here. You can do your ABAC here. So when a person leaves or a person moves around in a company, you want to make sure that access is regulated here. This is your source of truth. This is important. Why am I highlighting this one? Because you don't want people, help desk, administrators, you don't want people do not make changes here. You don't want that. Why you don't want that? Because you don't know, because you have no view. Because remember, you are watching the system, okay? This system regulates. This is our governor. It's our governance tool, okay? The system regulates access to all our applications and to all our stuff. HR controls, we have access to the organization. Governance is done here. People just get application access. And again, the rule is don't make changes here. Why you don't want to make changes here? Because if a change is done in AD and it does not propagate, if it does not propagate back to the RBAC system, you're going to have a problem, because what you're going to have is what we're going to be left with, what's known as an orphan account. Okay. So we don't want orphan accounts. We want to make sure that we keep track of everything. This is source of truth. This is our governance tool. Everything happens here. It controls access to applications. And it basically, and the only reason why we have AD there, guys, is because maybe sometimes we have legacy tools, right? Legacy apps. Remember the legacy piece with SAML and AD. This is to give access to your legacy apps. Okay. That's the only reason why we might have it, but there are other reasons too. But that's one of the main reasons why we potentially have it. I want to make sure that I have everything covered in my notes here. Let's see. So we have the joiner, mover, leaver. Now, in terms of our source of truth, okay, our HR source of truth, there's another concept that I'd like to introduce. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. The concept is called SODs, segregation of duty. Okay. Sticking with the accounting example, anybody who writes out checks, who makes out checks in any organization, is not allowed to sign them. We must segregate the duty. Everything must be segregated. This tool enforces the compliance, make sure that we have all the SODs in place. That's one example. Another example is anybody who works in development. For example, if you're a developer, you're a coder, you're a software engineer, the segregation of duty line is you are not allowed to push code to production. In other words, if you have roles, in this case, if you have RBAC that says developer, you are not allowed to work in production. There was a movie that was very funny. What is it? These guys were stealing $1 every time. I forgot the name of the movie. They were stealing $1. Anybody can type the movie's name somewhere. They were stealing dollars and making changes to the systems in the back end. And eventually they were able to retire and run away with the money. So if you have SOD, you cannot do that. If you're a developer, if you're writing code, you can't go back. Confidentiality, you can't, integrity, you can't go back and make changes because we are enforcing segregation of duties. Very important. And what's the purpose of this tool? The purpose of this particular tool is to make sure that access is not exceeded. The principle of least privilege, again, somebody asked about that earlier on, making sure that access does not exceed what you need to do your job. Make sure that access does not exceed what you need to do your job, because the principle of least privilege is you only need enough access for you to do your job. How do you enforce that control? How do you enforce that? You get an IGA tool. It's one way to enforce it. What do? You do access reviews. What do? You use SODs. Let's look at how people get another flow. The other flow I wanted to talk about is, let's say, for example, we have birthright access control in place. Okay. What we can do is we can basically put another flow in place, what we call access request. Remember, I gave it to you, right? So the way this works is a user request access. The way people request access in many organizations, they will go to an IGA system. Okay. Let's first finish our diagram real quick, and I'll show you how that typically works. And I'll show you, let me just make sure, hope I don't make it too big, then I run out of real estate. Yes, let's just do this one. Okay. And then, okay. And then the last one. Okay, we're going to call this access requests. So this is again our funny user. The user requests access. I'm just going to paste. I'm not going to type anymore. Once a user gets access, the IGA receives the approval, the system. There's a workflow that works in the back. Most of these IGA systems have workflows built in them. What it does is it sends the manager. Let me just add another box here. 2 more boxes here. Oh, another box here. And then we're going to do another box here. Okay, the manager IGA portal. Typically, the way the systems are designed, the manager has to approve the access. Sorry. And then what happens is the application owner also has to approve the access. Some companies have 3 levels, but most of the companies that I've seen have 2-level approvals. And then basically, access is granted. Okay, let's put our errors in. Okay, goes from user, go to the access portal. You get routed to a manager. It goes for another approval. And then once approved, access is granted. I don't know why we have another one. However, there's sometimes if the access is not approved, you basically get denied right here. And the flow stops. If your manager disapproves, your access is denied. If the application owner disapproves, and then you can design the way you want it, right? Typically, access is denied, and then you can't get, you're not granted access. That's pretty much it. Okay, I think, yeah. And that's kind of the flow here. This one is pretty straightforward. Okay, the purpose of the IGA portal here is obviously to, IGA, you go in, get access, approve, application access is granted, and then you can, sorry, the IDP, I think I missed the step. That's what I thought. Access is granted by the system. Basically, the IDP grants the access once approval is done, because all the engine is run here. There's a decision engine there. Grants access, and then basically access is granted to whatever, I don't know, some ERP system that you want to access. That's it. This is very important for compliance, because the purpose of this tool is to enforce compliance. all access. Okay. And think about it, right? So this one also will interesting. Some of the stuff, if you're asking for conflicting roles, it'll deny conflicting roles. For example, if you are in accounting and you sign checks, um, you basically can't access. You will not be able to be granted access. So the system, most of the system wants you to log in to this portal and you try and get a conflicting role. For example, you sign checks like I mentioned. Your access will be basically killed here. Yeah, basically that's it. And there's a built-in and so the conflict checks. And obviously you get denied once you that's it, and then your whole story ends here. So the system will not allow you to get through. Imagine you don't have this tool. Imagine you don't have this. Then you can basically just take if you don't have the IGA tool, you can pretty much take away all of this out. The whole thing. What you're going to be sitting with, you can have all these problems. If you remove this tool, you decided to build your own little thing. You decided to build your own thing. Basically, that's all you're going to have. And then all you're going to have is a straight line all the way down here. And that's it. If you don't have an access tool, IGA tool, that's it. And the auditors come around, you're going to fail compliance. Simple as that. Audit findings, fines, and all that kind of stuff. So you need an IGA tool for this purpose. One of the purposes you need it for. All right, so I hope you can see the difference between an IAM tool and an IGA tool. IAM tool grants access, is a gatekeeper. The IGA tool is for control and enforcement and compliance. So the gatekeeper, you can come in and out. This is our enforcer. Make sure that all those rules are enforced. Okay. Okay, I think I want to move on to PAM, or let me pause here. There's two more. We're almost done. Two more things, PAM, and we can go to PAM, and we can go to CIAM, and we can wrap it up.
Right. So let's
where is this Zoom thing?
Let's see.
Stop share. Okay, I'm back.
All right, let's see what questions we have here. So if you guys have any questions, let us know. So our first one is, how do cloud native IAM tools like AWS IAM or Azure AD differ from traditional on-prem solutions?
No difference. Okay. Let me put it this way. The technologies used, the underlying technologies are pretty the same way. For IGA, Microsoft has something called Entra ID as a solution, in addition to the SailPoint and the Savient. I did not mention Microsoft product because I don't think they're mature yet, but they supposed to do the IGA, the things that I was showing you. Microsoft can be used as your core system, allows you to protect your resources and access and control access into your resources. As far as I know, AWS, I don't think they have some sort of a fully fledged IGA system. They don't have that for approval. They have a different solution, and in my last session, I'm going to show you what they use for CIAM. But they don't have a fully fledged, but Microsoft does. You can actually use it if you're a Microsoft shop. But the only downside about that is because most of the Microsoft stuff are Microsoft ecosystem.
All right. So next question, does IGA allow single sign-on or passwordless?
Yeah, it does to some extent, but that's not the purpose of the IGA system. You can do that. I would separate maybe those two and have an IGA system and a governance system separately. It's a solution.
All right. And then the next one, I assume joiner is the same as onboarding and leaver is the same as offboarding.
Okay.
Are leaver and joiner proprietary terms used in this governance product?
So there's a slight difference. Okay, so when HR onboard you, remember my flow? They onboard you in the HR system, but you're joining a particular group or profile based on your roles. It's semantics, but you can say some people conflate it, but I like to remove the onboarding piece. But the entire process is called onboarding, right? From HR to the HR to your application. You're onboarded, you have access. The entire thing is called that.
All right. Well, I don't have any other questions right now. So if anybody wants to pop in a question or raise a hand, let us know. Otherwise, I guess we can let Isaac keep going. Kind of surprised we didn't have as many questions. Hey,
Yeah, I think maybe the diagram helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Sharon.
Sharon?
You mentioned, oh gosh, when it's an access where it's oh gosh, I just had it on my head. It's where the user doesn't match with the, oh gosh,
Separation of duties?
not separation of duties. It's more of a like a foster. They're not quite matched, so therefore it creates something user. I forgot the name that you mentioned. Like it's not they're not matched together. Oh gosh, I wrote it down. It's oh gosh.
Now take your time.
Say for instance, you have a user and the user authentication where you're doing more like say a migration and you don't move over the access where they have the user and and their logins doesn't
Access
match.
reviews?
So it creates often user.
Yes, often accounts, yes.
Often account. So with an often account, in order to prevent an often account, what are some of the things that you will do to prevent such a scenario from happening?
Yeah, good question. So the way you do that is you make sure your accounts in AD and your accounts in IGA system are synchronized at all times. And then you choose your IGA system as your source of authority, as a source of truth, because that system gets its information from HR and they talk together. So HR is the ultimate source. You got an IGA system, and then you synchronize to AD. If there's any discrepancies, you look at your source of truth. Make sure you have a single compliance tool and not multiple ones. In other words, you don't want help desk folks or admin folks coming in at the back of the system and adding people in AD behind your back. You don't want that. So you have a policy where you prevent that. So you create a written policy and say all access should come through X, Y, and Z. Policy is key. Did I answer the question?
Sharon, unmute yourself, Sharon.
Or just
And
thumbs up?
I'm sorry, that often user could also be for applications as well as humans,
Yes.
right?
There you go. You got it. Yeah, absolutely. Imagine if the person has 20 apps for whatever reason. You have to go to those 20 places and make changes there. So unless you have a centralized place where you make it, So you want to centralize your policy, you want to centralize your access at one place, synchronize everywhere, make sure that everything is in sync with this engine in the middle, this policy engine in the middle.
Thank you.
Centralize.
So I'll tell everybody we don't have any questions, and the questions start coming in. So I like that. Let's see what Fred's question is.
Fred, okay.
Yes, as quickly here, you did talk about the non-human account, okay?
Yes.
Now, could you explain quickly, maybe we'll talk about this later. If you have a non-human account, and the policy is not you humans should be responsible for this account, right? So the account is, you are responsible for the account, Isaac, and then you decide to step away. But the policy says it should only be one person with that account. What do you do first? You issue that account to somebody else? What is the balance there? I don't know if you understand what I'm asking.
I'm trying to understand. So the non-human accounts that are used for batch processes or whatever, automation piece, can be assigned to a department or a person. Are you asking if the person is no longer there? What is the crux of your question?
The person is no longer there, and you're supposed, the policy says it should only be for one person, and then the person leaves. Then when you disable that account, the batch will not happen because you're not supposed to have two people holding an account.
Yeah. Okay. So let me say something about that. That happens a lot. So they also become orphan, right? You don't know who owns it. Okay. So yeah. In that particular case, what you do then, your policy dictate that the department, the team, or the group should hold the account, not an individual. Under no circumstances should one person be able to do that, should hold access or should run non-human accounts. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's assigned to a team. Yeah, that's how you solve that one. So don't ever assign it to a single user, because you never know. People leave all the time and come and go all the time. Okay. Also, and most of the time, even if the person is gone, right? Most of those accounts will be vaulted, which is our next topic. Nobody knows where the passwords should be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, assign it to the group, or to the team, not to a person. That's kind of the idea there.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Anybody else? Or next?
We got a few more hands. We got John next.
Hi, Isaac. My question is more on the OT side. Have you seen a setup wherein when an employee is separated from the company, that person's access to the OT, when I say OT, say on to the DCS or on the SCADA system, is also automatically removed through that IGA, or because I have been in the industry for long that I haven't seen any of those automatically deactivated, right? So we have to manually come in, go into the DCS, let's say a Delta V or a Provox, any of those platforms, and we have to manually remove them. Is it something that, because my background is in the OT side, not on the IT.
Yes.
But we are looking at seriously, there's a lot of breaches on the OT side when it comes to cybersecurity, right? So have you seen anything like that that can be automatically activated using the IGA?
Yeah, that sounds like a solution question. Yeah, I have not seen. I know somebody who's in the same business, but they don't do OT. For those who don't know, OT stands for operational technology, and those are primarily used in the manufacturing industry, and in the energy sector, for example.
I'm from the oil and gas, and
in the energy sector, or even so I have not seen that. I would think, let me think of a solution. Maybe we can integrate an IGA system into the OT sector. I know the IT is mostly run by the IGA system, but I need to research a little more and find out how we can integrate automation inside your OT system. Now, I don't know about yours, but in the utilities, in a power utility, power generation, I don't know, you got the same rules. They have a rule of no logging in remotely. You're not allowed to use any of these things, what they call these USBs. Anybody who wants to work there, you can't remote in. You have to come in physically and make changes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's
yeah.
on a case-to-case basis.
Case-to-case basis.
The
Okay.
oil and gas or petrochemical industry, it's on a case-to-case basis. But to your point, it is getting challenged because of cybersecurity issues.
Yes.
But yeah, I just want to bring this up to you because most of the cybersecurity discussions I have attended, it mostly touches on the business side, right?
Yes.
Nothing on, I wouldn't say nothing, but very, very little on the OT side, right? So I'm very interested in what is in store for you guys in the industry, if there's a plan to involve the OT side.
OT side, absolutely. Yeah, we do. I know where I used to work before. We had an OT department. There's an expansion there. I did not work in the department. I know exactly what you mean, but you can use the same principles here. If we can integrate, if we can just maybe we need to do some research on the SailPoint product or the Savient product and see if they can integrate with OT. That would be a solution.
Yeah. Somebody commented that they should have a separate IGA. Yes, I understand that because there has to be physical separation.
Yes.
Or not physical, but firewall.
There you go. Yeah. No, we do understand you must separate it. Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. But we want compatibility. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
Yes.
All right. Thanks. Let's see. We got Collins, and then we've got Arnold, and then we'll get moving on along.
Hi, Isaac.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the lectures. They are great. So I want to ask a question. So what are the most IAM vulnerabilities and how can organizations mitigate them?
The most IAM vulnerabilities, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say most of them are in the identity-centric sector. And then the second most, I think what you do need to do is, I want you to go to top 10 OWASP, go to OWASP.org, and then you look at the information there. Let's see. OWASP.org. It'll tell you what are the top 10 vulnerabilities, the attacks that they're using, vectors. But what I'm seeing lately is social engineering or phishing. And what I'm seeing also is the lack of patching of devices. And the only reason why the social engineering has increased is because of the remote and hybrid workers, because people are away from the perimeter. Remember the network I mentioned in the beginning, that identity is the new perimeter. But go to OAuth.org.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
All right. And so we've got Arnold, and then we're going to get back to the content, as I said a moment ago.
Yeah, Arnold. And there's a Guru's Meet also.
All right, we can do Guru's as well after Arnold. So Arnold.
Hello. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
That's fine. Thank you very much for the great insights. So I've been following along, and I'm really absorbing as much as I can. So in terms of manual processes, like some organizations are still doing some of these things in a manual manner. Like, for example, you said that HR is the source of truth. But in some organizations, these departments actually operate in sort of in kind of silos.
Yes.
So
common.
So what can be done especially pertaining the joiner, mover, and leaver process. What can be done to make sure that the accesses are being reviewed, the levers are being terminated in the systems, since some other organizations are still going the manual way and they are actually operating in silos.
Okay, so two issues there. Okay, so there's a manual process in place, number one, which we is still very common. I think only 5% of the companies, according to some study, I don't know if it's true, 5%, can you believe it, guys? 5% of the companies have automated using the IGA system. Most people are using manual scripts, PowerShell scripts, Python scripts, etc., etc. So you're going to have to introduce, the only way to get this done is you're going to have to introduce what we call risk management. There are 4 pillars in risk that I want you to introduce. I want you to take notes. Obviously, this is not part of my lecture, but let me just mention it. You want to avoid, so I want you to review RMF, right? Risk Management Framework. Number 1, always avoid the risk. That's if you can. In other words, do something about it. If it's patching, patch the thing. Don't let it, number 2, don't let it sit there. Number 2, mitigate risk. Mitigate risk. Number 3, mitigate risk, meaning what we do in security. All we can do is we mitigating risk. We cannot completely avoid 100% of the risk. Number 3, assign the risk or transfer the risk to someone else. Insurance company, consulting, whatever. Transfer the risk. That's all you can do. And number 4, I'm going to answer your question here, number 4. Accept the risk. Who accepts the risk? You as the admin or the cybersecurity architect or engineer, whatever you do, you want to do some sort of a communication and you ask them if they want to or willing to accept the risk. If they are willing to accept the risk, they need to sign off on that risk. You need to transfer the risk to them and make sure that they can accept the risk. And that is how you do that. And what you're going to do then is you're going to introduce a, believe it or not, policy works. Introduce a policy where there's a violation, there's a penalty, there's fines if you violate an internal policy. Because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to penalize the company and public trusts, financial gain, you're going to be reputational damage to your company. That's important. The second question about shadow IT, you mentioned shadow IT, you call it silos. It's a very common thing. There are tools that you can use to scan for shadow IT. In other words, I am sitting in the, who makes the most money in the company? Marketing company, the marketing department. I think they bring in the money. They decided, these IT people take too long with everything. I'm going to get my own little IT people going here on the side. That's very common. So you want to get a tool that'll scan for what we call shadow IT. So you don't want to make sure that you have a shadow IT problem or a silo problem away from the general IT or away from the cybersecurity teams. Make sure that you do that. All right.
All right. One more question and then
One
we'll
more. Let's go to bolting.
Gersamet, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name.
It's good, Sumit. So
Hi
I
there.
have a question. It's a it's a scenario based one. No?
Oh
So
my goodness.
suppose a service
Oh
account
boy.
is yeah. Suppose a service account is assigned to a team and interactive logon is enabled on it. Okay.
Well,
And
what is
that
enabled,
service
sorry?
account is
I
used
didn't hear that.
interactive logon
Oh, okay.
means a
I
person
know
can
what you
log in. Yeah.
mean. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interactive login is enabled on this, and that account is used for some application troubleshooting. Okay. By mistake, a person has done some open share or a network share, a file to everyone in the group. Then how I can audit this thing? Because IAM is authenticate, authorize, and audit.
Is the first question is this account part of the IGA structure? Is it inside the vault, inside the database, in the IGA database? Is it tracked by the
Yeah,
IGA?
It is tracked by IJA. It is created by that means, but how I can track a particular person has done so and so.
Yeah, I've seen that problem. So for that particular problem, unfortunately, the P word again, the policy word again, unfortunately, we have to wait until we get to PAM to answer that question. I have a solution. It's a proposed solution. Let's see if we can answer it. Are you ready?
Let's
Will
hear
that
it.
work for you? Did you get my response? My response is there anybody else before I answer the question?
No, we don't have any else.
Okay. So the way I would attack this question, this answer is our third session is PAM, Privileged Access Management. Now, what is PAM? Privileged Access Management, basically, you want to secure the crown jewels. They say 35% of the breaches of basically the hacks involve valid account abuse. Credential misuse is a new perimeter, according to CrowdStrike. What you're talking about. Privileged accounts are a prime target because they're compromised and you can use them to move laterally. You can use them to exfiltrate or to steal information. So what you need there is I would vault that credential in a PAM solution, which is another tool. I know you keep on buying tools from Isaac. So you have now three tools. You have your IAM tool, you have your IGA tool. For the administrators, those who are doing high level or high privilege access, for elevated access or privilege access, you need a privilege access tool. And anybody who wants to interact with anything, you don't permanently credentialize your service accounts. You want to use check in and check out using a PAM system. What does it do? It rotates the passwords. Nobody knows what the password is. You want to make sure that the person who interact with that service account, because the service account needs to be vaulted, the person who is interacting with it, their sessions are recorded, their sessions are monitored. It literally records the sessions as you're checking in and checking out. So we know who's the last person. So you want to go back to the source of the place where the account was saved by using vaulting. You're going to be using vaulting for that solution. Thank you very much for that question. So, which leads me to the vaulting piece. So what are we trying to do is we're trying to do a central repo system. Sorry. We're trying to do a central repo system. The central repo system allows us to vault or encrypt. So all our passwords will be stored. Here's a key, encrypted. You can't decrypt it. Nobody can see it. Number one. Number two, all our passwords will be issued just in time. In other words, you're going to have a temporary elevation, temporary privilege escalation. Do your administrative tasks. Do your running your stuff, what you need to do. What the system will do is, you can go on mute. What is your name so I can address you? Sorry. The person with the last question?
Yep, I asked them to unmute themselves. Whoops.
Me?
Can you get your name again, please, sir?
It is Sumit.
Sumit.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sumit, then what you will do then is you do a session recording, session monitoring. What you will do then is some of the PAM tools would allow you not to store any permanent passwords on the application. So remember the triangle we looked at? Every time the system, this time you take the user out, the system tries to get in, we go ahead and make sure that the system grabs the credentials and the person can interact with. Or you can check your credentials in and out. That's one way of doing that. I think that's a safe way of doing that because then if your authentication if your authentication comes from a vault and the vault is monitored And the vault has a session recording, and the vault only gives you temporary elevation. That's how you can control access there. That's a control that you think about. And obviously, I'm not sure if it's going to solve that particular problem that you're having. What if you don't have a vaulting system? You can get, there are what others you can use. Obviously, you don't have to use the main ones, but that's a way to do that. Unfortunately, I've seen that too many times and know exactly what you're talking about. In order, if I want to do below the radar tasks, nobody can see me, I would use your service account to do stuff, check user service account to do administrative tasks, because we don't know, because this what the logging, the service account activity will be logged and not the actual person who's using it. But I believe, in my mind, a PAM solution is a way to resolve some of that issue. But I want to show you real quick a attack chain diagram for credential compromise if you don't have a PAM system. So that's what typically happens. If I can quickly share here, let me just see here one more time. Okay, so let's see. I'll come back to this. Okay. Okay, let me just see. Okay, let me just see. Okay, this is a tech chain diagram. It's a high-level one, credential escalation. This is kind of the way they do it if you don't have a PAM system. Credentials compromise, basically, the bottom part is your controls. It's how you defend them. It's a very basic flow. Once your credentials are compromised, what people do, they escalate a privilege, and then they basically use data exfiltration methods. Now, to control that, to defend that, you do MFA and phishing awareness. You can do FIDO keys or MFA. What you can do then is you do least privilege, like I mentioned. You do JIT, just-in-time access. You introduce to avoid privilege escalation, what Sumit is referring to there. You introduce a PAM solution, but if it's least privilege is nice, but if you have an uncontrolled or a non-human account, it's kind of a challenge to do. And then what you will do as well is you introduce a data loss prevention, a tool for any egress ones. For example, you have a network DLP. What the network DLP basically does, I believe maybe Mike during this bootcamp we'll discuss this. We'll discuss the sorry about that. We'll discuss the DLP. The DLP prevents data being exfiltrated from your network or from your devices. So you'll introduce these controls basically. That's how you defend against that. All right. Okay, so then let's just move on. So PAM helps with that. I hope I answered that question, but we can go back if you want to. There'll be a more Q&A later on. Okay, so then PAM consists of a secrets management. Now, AWS also has an HSM, which is a secrets management key. I think what they call it, HSM, I believe, or CMK. I don't know what's the new name now. So what it does, it basically does rotation, it does versioning. You can store your SSH keys, you can store app tokens. Remember, somebody was asking about tokens and how you can protect that. You can do that there. For example, if your tokens are used for non-human services like APIs, you can store them in there. And also, you want to make sure that you integrate your DevSecOps using CI/CD. If you are using CI/CD pipeline, you want to make sure that none of the developers, besides developers not having access to your production, make sure your developers don't put passwords in the code. Okay, that's one way. So they have to check, you do a integration with a PAM tool. So all of that is automatically done. And nobody has access is supposed to see that. And Azure has tried to solve that. They've got principal accounts and they've got managed accounts. I think their managed accounts, you can't see the passwords. Is they give you is for their services. You don't see it. When you create the service, you get a non-human account. You have no access to it. You can't see it. It's always a good thing. But and this ties back to what Mike spoke about early on with encryption, cryptography. So when you do that lesson, this particular solution is basically based largely on a cryptographic AES or another cryptographic solution, and how we make sure that we either vaulting or encrypt our keys. So it's key to this particular one. And also, what we want to do is we want to do some sort of an endpoint privilege management. Basically, we only give people just enough privileges. We want to make sure that we enforce people when they get to particular endpoints. And again, the target audience here is the privilege of this access is mostly for engineers, administrators, and all that. For example, James, who's working in where does James work? Okay, I've got marketing, I've got accounting. James is in HR. James has no business having access to the PAM tool. There's no reason for him to have this particular access. It's out of bounds. There's no reason for him to have that. Okay. And you can also store what's called break glass accounts. So this one is a little controversial, but some people have a process with break glass account. What is a break glass account? The break glass account is the account that you use, which does happen. If you lose your main root account, your main account that you use for once in a while, that you use now and then, you need a backup break glass account that you can check out, that you can take and go ahead and correct whatever you do in case a Sanjay or Sanjeet has left with the credentials. I don't know, for some other reason. He was a main guy. Now he's no longer with the company. You need a break glass account. And the break glass account rules are very policy-based again. Everything around policy, guys. Make sure you have 2 or more people. Make sure everything is audited. Make sure that every time you go into a particular area where you're going to be retrieving the vault, you're retrieving the break glass account. If it's vaulted in your PAM, make sure all of those controls are in place. If it's a physical security you want, you can do that. If you want to use something else, a HashiCorp vault, whatever vaulting system that you want to use for your break glass account, your break glass account is key. It's important. Make sure that you do that. And also, you do some sort of an integration flow. Make sure you do discovery, you onboard, and you rotate. Make sure that you rotate your credentials. You can rotate them, or you can let AWS do it for you. Azure can also do rotations if you want to. Okay, so some of the discussion points that I have here. How does IGA and PAM align with governance, policy, and compliance? Basically, for enforcing SOD policies in audits, how do these integrate with compliance frameworks like NIST or ISO for ongoing risk management? The way IGA ensures that basically who has access to what, basically it uses some sort of a account lifecycle governance. It determines who has access and why and for how long. And PAM, what PAM does here, it basically secures privileged accounts and sessions, and it reduces insider and admin risk. Now, what is insider threat? Now, insider threat is threat that comes from inside your organization, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So sometimes people inside your organization are doing something maybe maliciously, or maybe they're making mistakes. We're all humans, we all make mistakes. You want to make sure that you have these controls in place to reduce that. Again, the risk piece is to mitigate that, right? You want to mitigate that, and also admin risk. Okay. And how does that tie in with zero trust? Now, one of the principles, one of the policies or pillars of zero trust is you never trust and you always verify. Never trust and always verify. The old way of thinking was trust and verify. You remember the old way of thinking? Trust but verify? We don't do that in cybersecurity. Never trust, always verify. Never trust, always verify. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce insider threat. You're trying to reduce credential compromise. That's what you're trying to do. PAM is a great tool of doing that. Remember, once your crown jewels are gone, guys, your elevated access, ladies and gentlemen, your crown jewels, your privileged accounts, you kind of a little bit of you have a huge problem. All right, and also make sure that you enforce segregation of duties. Both tools can enforce both segregation of duties and also support critical audits. How does it enforce critical segregation of duties? Only people who are allowed to check credentials in and out. Think of it as a big vault, right? John can access the vault, but Sally cannot. Mary can get into the vault, for example, but Sam cannot. So you have these things. And it's also based on, again, back to the RBAC model, back to our ABAC model. So you always want to try this. And the way to take what you can take away from this SOD thing is for you to effectively enforce SOD is to do a proper RBAC, right? Make sure that people's roles or ABAC is properly assigned so they don't exceed their boundaries. Okay, very important. And you want to support also policy-driven access. And these policy-driven access must align with your organizational controls. So it all depends. It all depends on what your organizational controls are. And also, you want to provide audit trails at all times. And this tool does that, right? And you want to make sure that you've automated attestation. What I'm saying by that is attestation means certification. What is certification? Certification is basically, or attestation is basically every quarter. Now, this is very different from your regular accounts. Remember, our three accounts, contractors, users, and our maybe non-human accounts. For the privileged accounts, typically, depending on the regulation, audits have to be conducted, access reviews. In other words, hey, does John still need this access? Those reviews. They are typically done every quarter, high frequency, every quarter. Regular accounts, every 6 months. Not so important accounts, maybe once a year. Again, what's the idea? The idea is in security is you want to make sure that you guard your highly treasured accounts. Make sure that you guard those accounts that are highly treasured, because you want to spend 50, 2 million, 2, 3 million. You don't want to spend 2, 3 million on junk, right? Obviously, right? If it's just a bunch of dev or QA data, it's not a big deal. But your privileged accounts are very important. And now what do these two tools do together? Your IGA tool and your PAM tool. They both integrate with NIST 800/53. They both integrate with frameworks like ISO 27001, sorry, and also CIS control for maintenance of continuous compliance. Because remember, you need to comply. Some organization, some industry, whoever is in the utilities or in oil and gas is highly regulated. You can't just do whatever you want to. You must abide by regulations. Now, both of them, they basically do the identity layer of governance in a zero trust model. Again, I know we didn't trust on the zero trust. Another takeaway, zero trust is three things. Do continuous verification. What do you continuously verify? You verify the person who's logging in. You verify their device that they're using. And you want to make sure they only have access to things they need. You narrow their access to the stuff only to the stuff that you need in order for them to do their jobs. You don't give broad access. Okay? And then number two, you never trust and you always verify. You want to make sure that you constantly verify. You never trust. In other words, what you're trying to do there, your objective is to reduce insider threat and admin risk. And the last part of zero trust is what you want to do. I'm just throwing this in there. You want to make sure that all of your critical high value assets are segmented first. Make sure that if people are accessing it with enough access, only to do enough to do their job. You don't just do segmentation like in VLANs or in the way things are structured today. Remember, you have in most organizations you have different segmentation, right? You have your admin account, so your admin department with their own structure, your LAN. You have your SOC area there. You have your NOC area. You have your marketing area. They got their own thing. Accounting, HR, IT, OT in this case. Those are called segmentation. With zero trust, what we are saying is don't just segment it, micro-segment it. Why? Because you want to reduce the blast radius. Because when people get in, once your credentials are compromised, people can elevate their access and they can move. They come in through the accounting department and they can move to marketing because what is the goal? They're trying to get to the admin part. They move laterally east to west until they get to the admin LAN or VLAN as we call it, virtual LAN, right? LAN. So make sure you segment that. Make sure that if anything is segmented, those people in that department, whatever app they're accessing, make sure they can only access that app. That's all they need to do and nothing else. I think I covered everything. Vaulting, vault your stuff, check in and out, record your sessions, and fall in love with the PAM tool. And our next session is going to be, the final session is going to be about CIAM, which is the your Amazons, your Sprouts and Kroger Foods and Publix, whatever supermarkets you guys are using, Spar in Europe, Marks and Spencer, they're using some sort of a CIAM tool. I can continue, or we can get some questions if you have anything else, just to wrap up the final session. You can, I'll pause, or I can continue if you want to.
Yeah, give me a second. Let me see what we might have here. So we got one question. What role does identity governance play in preventing insider threats?
It basically enforces that the identity governance, great question, enforces the rollback access. So you think of it this way, okay? The way you think about these things, the insider threat. So you always think about not just one tool to solve your problems, right? So you think about how do my tools play along with other solutions to solve my problem? How do I use RBAC for enforcement in, for example, to mitigate inside threat? Okay. The CIAM, not the CIAM, sorry. I'm looking at my CIAM notes here, sorry. The IGA tool will basically use that to enforce or to govern your access only to that, correct? And it'll also, unfortunately, this is too late, but it will also track your activities as you're trying to go to areas you're not supposed to go. It'll make sure that you don't overstep your boundary. It'll record your sessions, and then it'll mitigate that. That's how I'm going to do. But it works with other things as well. It's not just the one thing. Don't use one tool to solve all your problems, basically.
All right, let's see. Sharon's got her hand up.
Sharon, go ahead, please.
When you mentioned segregation, like would that be more of to prevent a single point of failure from a monolithic to microservices, so each department is isolated?
It's a great question. Segmentation. Okay. So you bring in a new topic, microservices. So the microservices idea is a great service. It's a great solution. The microservices is saying, so let me just say something. Most of the tools that I've talked about, SailPoint, they don't support microservices, unfortunately. It's a single monolithic database. But in order for you to do what you want to do with microservices, what does a microservices do? A small microservice only does one thing. That service that you write the code for. You are saying, I want payments account. It'll only do the payment account. I want account retrieval. That's a microservice. That's different from the segmentation piece It's more with Mike's area, networking. The segmentation piece is to do with LANs, local area network departments. You have the marketing department, this department, this department. Those are what we call segmented, but they have a broad segmentation. In your marketing department, you have somebody was complaining about shadow IT, right? You have 10 or 15 server in one LAN, one big VLAN, but you want to segment it to only access certain things. Microsegment is different. You segment it, microsegment is a smaller subset of that. But the microservice does something else. Microservices execute code in small, tiny actions, which is a great solution. Did I answer the question, Sharon? Yes. Is there anything else? Any follow-up questions?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
All right.
Right.
We can go to CIAM or if there's anything else. On PAM is straightforward, right? There's nobody wants to ask about PAM, privileged access management.
I'll tell you what, you said that the CIAM is the last component for today?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that, and then let's use the rest of the time to go through any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. What is CIAM? Let me throw it out there. Let me just ask anybody. Has anybody heard of, before we continue, let me ask you back a question. Just put up your hand or something. I almost say your face. Put up your hand. Have you anybody heard of CIAM? Consumer Identity Management. Consumer Identity and Access Management. Some people, Raja. Jasmine. Is that Jasmine? Okay. I miss you, Jasmine. Sharon has heard of CIAM. So there's a few people who've heard of CIAM. Okay, and John. Okay, can somebody tell me, or anybody, let's just do a last one, just more interactive. What do you guys know of CIAM? Anybody, what do you think is what CIAM, or do you know the flow? Because we talk about flows today, right? Anybody wants to take a stab or tell me or tell the class what the CIAM flow looks like? Anybody, please.
I just made it where everybody can unmute themselves. This is your only chance, everybody. Come off mute and answer his question.
CIAM flows. Let's talk about that. How do you think it works? Or if you don't know, just say like blah, blah, blah uses it.
Isn't it something like a customer wants to create a new account and that's the company lets you create an account, like Amazon, for example, you can create your own customer identity over there and then you use that to buy products, and Amazon in the back is maintaining your identity, letting you do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great application. That's a great answer. What else? Anybody else? I see Sharon.
Yes.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
For instance, in my line of business, for consumers, you want to make sure that they're protected, so they use multi-factor authentication for security purposes. So that's something that I'm thinking about on the lines of security in order to access certain applications like production.
Absolutely. And what else? These are all great explanations about CIAM. Oh, Raja's here. Hi there.
I know. I've been
I
silently
missed you,
watching
Raja.
you. So the way I think about SAM is exactly like IAM, but it's for non-employees. And because of the number of people we deal with, it's very, I guess, resource intensive to keep managing their, life cycle of their accounts. So SIAM can, I guess, automatically do a lot of those things if we configure it correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You guys are great. I have actually a table that I put together. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Raja, I think you nailed it. I think that's one of the characteristics of CIAM. As usual, Raja was a great asset. in a class that I'm doing on the, what's it called again? Security architecture class.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And Raja's always a great asset there. Yeah. Some of the stuff, obviously, maybe we're going through some stuff that he might have covered already, but it's okay. So let's go and see. You guys are all right. Nobody's wrong. Let's see here. Sorry. Let me find my Zoom again. Me and the Zoom thing. Sorry, I'm mostly Microsoft Teams. You guys should be able to see this now. This is kind of the idea here. So we started off with IAM. We're going to end off with CIAM. Is it clear or should I make it bigger? This is CIAM. CIAM is basically, sorry, this is the difference between the two. It's basically, like I mentioned, employees, contractors, and internal staff members. I don't know why, it's the same thing. And then CIAM caters for customers, partners, vendors, and external users, like Raja was saying. The primary focus of obviously the one thing, let's just look in the right column instead of me repeating. We've already gone through all this on the left, I'm hoping. I think we covered everything. And I will explain my last point there, just not to confuse everybody. It's seamless user experience while maintaining security. You can use social login if you go to a particular website. You can use your Google account, you can go to your Facebook account, Apple ID, and adaptive. Okay. So now those things there, those Google, Facebook, Apple, and LinkedIn, those are your IDPs, identity providers. Okay. And fine-grained consent, progressive profiling. What is progressive profiling? Progressive profiling, somebody's already mentioned it. Progressive profiling is when you sign up the first time, you provide the minimum of information. And as you progress, you give more and more information. If you've seen the banks, hey, can we update your phone number? Hey, can we get this for you? And the reason why they do that is because they don't want to discourage you from filling out if you go to the doctor's office, I don't know why the doctors haven't fixed that yet. When you go and they give you that clipboard and you sit down, 2 pages. Oh my goodness, you must fill out this. Oh my goodness, all this stuff and what is my allergies and blood type and who's got my history. When you do CIAM, guys, don't do that. You're going to lose customers. It's mainly for retailers and public-facing customers. And the system is designed for what? Availability, right? Millions of users. IAM is only for thousands, okay? It uses OAuth, OpenID, and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you why. I left out SAML on purpose, and I'm going to explain to you why in a minute. You want to avoid, and the risks are account takeovers, and etc. And then I mentioned here, comply with all the sales folks, PCI DSS, which is a retail, GDPR, which is a European standard, CCPA is a California, PDS2. What is PDS2? I forgot. But anyway, privacy laws. Obviously, you're not allowed to, you need people consent, right? You can't move people's information in California or in the European Union. They must opt in and consent. Okay? They got all of these, what we call I forgot data, I'll think of the word. And this is self-service, self-registration. And we also covered movers and shakers, not shakers, movers, levers, and shakers, and blah, blah, blah. Those who move around, I'm just trying to add some humor here. Okay, customer experience, you prioritize frictionless login. You don't want people to be bogged down with 500 questions and they don't understand your form. Make sure you get the minimum information and then so that people can sign up. All right. Let's get into the other stuff. Let's just get more information on the CIAM piece here. It scales very well. It does progressive profiling. Let me go to the flow real quick. CIAM is a very important piece in terms of flow. I think I mentioned, let me just see if I have my thing here. Yeah, I hope you guys can read this. I'm going to bring it up. I was trying to do this on Draw AI, Draw IO. Let me see if I can get it in Draw IO. I'm using Draw IO for my diagrams, but for some reason, I just couldn't get the wording properly done. Cancel. They just go File, let me input this. Let's see, device, SIAM login. Oh, there's an error on that code. Okay, so my XML has got an error. I'm gonna have to use the slides. Okay, so let's get to the flow real quick, and that should basically, it's a very basic one. It's not too complicated. It's not too crazy. Let me just get to the flow. Okay. Share. Okay, I'm sure you can see my screen by now. Okay, let's see if I can make it bigger. Sorry about the yellow. I couldn't get the Draw IO to play with me here when I was putting this together. Okay, the flow is pretty straightforward. So everything now, here's a kicker in IAM. Here's a secret. Everything in IAM, SIAM, IGA is always referring back to some sort of an IDP, a gatekeeper, an authenticator. So the user signs in to an application client, to an application. They get redirected to the Auth0. I'm using Auth0 as an example because some people ask, oh, what are we using? Auth0 is part of the Okta company, I believe. They are signing in, they get challenged, they get to the authentication piece, the social login pops up. Okay, they provide their credentials, and I can go into detail. I'm going to just give you a high level one, and we can go, if you come to my class on Thursdays, we're going to go into details. I promise you in this, but this is high level. So when you click on the application, you get redirected. So what you're doing here is you are saying, hey, I want to access Wayfair. Is it wayfair.com, the shopping website? And they're going to send you to something. I know there's some other intermediaries like CDNs for those who are in the AWS world, all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that. Let's just go straight to the SIAM tool. Okay. What the SIAM tool is going to do and say, hey, I know about Isaac. Okay. Let's give him, to be safe, let's ask him to provide his credential. And then what I do then, I provide my credentials, I authenticate, and I provide my MFA as usual, or I'll provide my passkey in this case. In a modern term, I provide my passkeys. Once I provide my passkey to the SIAM tool or to Auth0 or Okta, whatever you guys are using in the backend, in your retail, your company, Kroger, whatever, Publix, Buc-ee's, whatever you buy your stuff from, Marks and Spencer, that SIAM tool is going to give you something called an auth code. I think you need to write this down. It's not in my notes. It gives you an auth code. Why is it giving you an auth code? It's giving you an auth code because it's saying, hey, because you as the end user has already said, I'm appointing this person to be my representative. I want to interact with these applications. And so that Raja or Sanjay or Sam doesn't fake the website, coming up with another new website and trying to get in. If Sam or Raja or whoever else does not have an auth code, I cannot interact with them. Okay? Once I get an auth code, the application gets the auth code. Okay, they take the auth code, they interchange it. They change it for a token, an access token. You get two tokens, access token and an identity token. You take that token, in this case, not you. At this point, the user is no longer involved. Okay? The token is taken by the application and it's given to the system you want to do. So now on your bank account, you see your name, hello, Marjorie, right? That is the first token, identity token. And then you click on bank balance, okay? The bank account, sorry, the website, the client in this case, or the application, it goes to the back and grabs your information based on the token that you provided. And you give that an access token, and that's how you are granted access. In simple term, you sign in, You get redirected, you authenticate, social login, whatever, and then access is granted. Now, let me quickly do the do's and don'ts. When it comes to regulated industry, when it comes to banking, healthcare, don't use social login. Doesn't work. You can go try your bankofamerica.com, chase.com. They don't accept your Facebook account to log into it. Highly regulate. You don't do that. All right. And what else? That's about it. That is the gist of this particular one. Let's see what else I have here. So basically, the idea here is to make sure that we redirect all our information over to you. So you have your main system. You can use it from anywhere, any place. Now people can basically you can log in from the cloud, home, mobile. It doesn't really matter. And there's other issues that are emerging. There are other emerging threats that are coming up. For example, anomaly detection. There are something called automated access reviews you can try. There are some deep fake resistant authentication methods you can use. So there's a bunch of interactive controls that you can place that you can help you to do that. And obviously the safe way is you want to use a passkey in this case. You want to make sure that anybody who gets into your shopping cart is verified. And the big difference here with authorization, let's touch on that one real quick. The big difference is in authorization. You can log in as a guest. You can say, I'm a guest, I just want to do this and get in, or I'm registered, I can do this. So those are the two big ones. And in some cases, the other one is commercial versus, in banks, there's commercial versus retail, right? There's a different authorization for commercial clients, for example, HOAs, for example, real estate agencies, they use a different authorization there. And then there's the general public in the bank, your regular banks, your regular bankers. Those are called retail bankers, and they have a different authorization there. So authorization does play a little bit of a role, but not a big one. Now, let me give you back to the SAML thing. Why I'm not including SAML and CIAM. Now, how can I keep this high level? Okay, I'm gonna have to go there. The reason why you can use SAML, but SAML can be used in very, very special circumstances in a CIAM solution. For example, if you have a partner, you can do a SAML. SAML works well if you have someone on the other end to talk to. If you don't have anybody to talk to on the other end, it'll be kind of a challenge to do SAML. Because why? The way SAML is set up is you have to exchange what is called metadata. In other words, I download metadata, I send it to Sharon at my partner organization. Sharon gets my metadata, upload it to their IDP. They download their metadata and send it to me. And now we have what we call a federation. And that's my final word. And then we are federating. The best way for those who are in politics and understand the American system and the Nigerian system, governance, is something called federations. We are a federal government. The country I come from, there's a centralized government. They're not using federation. The power sits in Pretoria. In the US, the power sits in Washington, but the states have federal power. They are federating in a way. The central government is mirrored on the local government, and therefore we can federate across different organizations. What does federation mean? You can interact between organization A and organization B. You can interact between vendor A and vendor B. More terminologies. CIAM uses terminologies like B2C or business to consumer. This is the one that we've been talking about. SAM also uses terms like B2B, business to business. In your business to business solution, you could use SAML. In your B2C, where you're dealing with millions, Joe Public, I don't think Yeah, I don't think the guy from Mississippi or whoever from wherever, New York is going to give you any SAML information. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. So what you're going to be doing there as a solution, you're going to be using tokens, OIDC tokens. You're going to be using tokens in order for people to connect. So you give people tokens. On the one end, they're going to exchange their tokens for access, and they can access your resources. And the tokens will be scoped or restricted based on their access level. Guest, like I mentioned, guest, retail, commercial, HOA, whatever your commercial thing is. So things to take away from CIAM, millions. There are two ways to do it. You can do B2B, you can do B2C, or you can do a B2B, B2C relationship. Now, how does that one work? The B2B, B2C relationship works this way. You are an insurance company, for example, okay? I have a B2B, you work for XYZ organization, and I'm getting my medical from Blue Cross, right? All the people in my XYZ organization have access to have access to Blue Cross, for example. All the people, so in other words, XYZ and Blue Cross have a B2B relationship. The people who work for XYZ have a B2C relationship. Okay, that's kind of too much. Let's just pause there. Let's see if there's any questions. So the SIAM can get very tricky. It gets a lot of topic. It's a huge one as well. And this is just a high level. Like I said in my Thursday class, we do a deep dive in many of these topics. We go through tokens, we go through flows, we spend our time, but I've only have limited time. And because the audience is mixed, I don't know who understand what I'm saying and who's bored with what I'm saying. It's a challenge. Over to you, Chris.
All right. So just do we have any additional content for the fundamentals of identity and access management?
Yeah, my final closing comments here, Chris, is let's tie it all together to the initial lecture from Mike. Identity and risk control, SIAM, basically uses zero trust to inform who can access what by replacing perimeter trust. We can do that. We do a framework alignment there, for example, by doing SOD, and I mentioned that already. We can protect against credential theft by making sure that our entry point is evaluated and properly vetted. We need to do a business continuity and a disaster recovery. You don't want to have just one system in place. Make sure that your vendor that you're going to be dealing with is highly available. Make sure you implement a failover. Make sure that you demand this thing from your vendor. Make sure that your federation is redundant. Make sure you do token caching. Make sure you don't have to. Those who are in the AWS called CDNs, there's caching involved there. So in a token world, we don't have to fetch every time. So we want to cache that in our API. But again, that needs further discussion. Make sure your solution is resilient. Make sure that you monitor access, you revoke compromised sessions, and you maintain logs for continuous assurance. Make sure that you do adaptive authentication. Make sure that you can do conditional access. What am I saying? Especially for your B2B partners, make sure that SAMI is not logging in from, for example, from Rio at 9 a.m. and then at 9:15 they log in from Lagos. Okay, we don't want that. That's a big no. That's called conditional access. We want to make sure that we have that in place, especially for our commercial customers, our B2B partners. Make sure we evaluate that by your location, and that is going to do with attribute again, right? But we call it conditional access. So make sure that you evaluate people's conditions as they're logging in, and make sure there's no impossible travel. Make sure that people, if you monitor the trend, make sure that and the great things about this, make sure that you log your B2B client, make sure that all the activities logs abnormalities, right? Not everything, because these are millions of transactions. Any abnormalities, I would select maybe commercial clients and people who are logging in the middle of a 2 a.m. Suddenly, the guy at the real estate company is logging at 2 a.m. and typically he logs in at 9 in the morning, and then he be seeming to be moving around from St. Petersburg, Russia, and all the way to Melbourne, Australia, all in a matter of hours. That's a big red flag. Make sure that you flag those activities. I think those are the tips I can give. Yep. Any questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh no.
Let's get to these. All right, let's see. Okay, so we've got okay. So how does IGA enforce conditional access policies that combine user risk scoring, device health, and geolocation in real time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's built into the product. Microsoft has a conditional access platform. You can use Microsoft, for example, that I'm aware of. When you log in, it evaluates your access, looks at where you are, but you must set the P word again, the policy. You set the policies and then you implement the conditional access policies, depicting those terms. I've done it in Entra ID, which is a Microsoft product. You can do that for sure. Absolutely. Good idea. Even for your new, remember, never trust, always verify.
All right. Next one. Does the IGA work the same way as Microsoft Entra ID?
It is kind of the same thing,
Okay.
but it's not mature yet. So stick with the two I mentioned, SailPoint and Save. I'm sorry, Microsoft, but you guys need to work on this product a little later.
I mean, it goes back to the premise that Mike always talks about. Are you going to go to the Swiss Army knife, or are you going to go to the machete? You're going to go to the one that's purpose built, the experts, the people that have done that's where they spend all their money, all their time.
And I promise you, Microsoft is going to catch up very quickly.
Not saying they won't, but like right now, the other people are
the other people are better at this.
Yeah. So always go with the best.
That's all I can say about it.
Yeah. Next one. Out of the 4 or 5 tools that you've talked about for IAM, Okta is the only open source we can get practice on. Is it necessary to be certified in Okta?
No, I don't think. Okta has got a limited access. You must use Auth0, your partner. Auth0 is the one that you can practice in.
Okay.
You can get, I think, a month's access. They're very restricted in the access. SailPoint you can download and play around with it.
Is it the same that what Azure called B2B and B2C? Assume it's the CIAM is the same, business to business and business to consumer.
Yeah, inside the CIAM tool, we have the B2B, B2C solution. And by the way, Microsoft, believe it or not, they also do it in the same tool. They can also do it for you. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot about the AWS thing. In AWS, the B2B, B2C is called, geez, like it. Anybody help me? What's it called? Cognito, sorry. So they don't have an IGA tool, but they do have a CIAM tool. Microsoft, did somebody type it in here? But if you have typed in, thank you very much. It's called Cognito. Inside your console, go to Cognito. You can set up what they call user flows in a B2B, B2C fashion in AWS, okay? And Microsoft obviously uses Azure and ID.
All right. Let's see. Does CIAM use or can it use PKI?
Can CIAM use PKI? Okay, you're dealing with the public. You can. Anything can use whatever solution you want to. Those 4 authentication. PKI, OIDC, SAML, blah, blah, blah. But be cognizant of who you're dealing with. Okay. Because in mutual authentication, both parties must agree, right? So that goes on to the heart of cryptography. Okay, so in mutual authentication, you say, hey, server, IAM, hey, here's my, can you tell me how you're legitimate, basically, all right? So in other words, the product itself has some sort of a certificate because it has to be legitimate. You have to go to HTTPS if you do your shopping. You can go to any website today. It has some sort of a HTTPS thing. And sometimes it's handled by a vendor, by someone else, third party. But let me give you the principle. Mike is going to go into details with this. Okay. You have your authentication piece. You say, hey, mutual authentication. Hey, I'm here. I provide services. I'm a server. And the client says, hey, I want services from you, but let me check your certificate. And then it says, hey, here's my certificate. I'm legitimate. And then if legitimate, you check, make sure it's not revoked, make sure it's valid. And then the server turns back and says, hey, Mr. Client, can I see your certificate? That's where the problem starts. Can you see the problem there if it's a mutual thing?
Right. Let's see.
And guys, this stuff you're not going to get in your CCISSP. I appreciate it. I have the textbook. I went through it. It's not there. And I thank you for coming for the nuanced stuff.
How do large organizations manage access reviews and audits at scale?
Wow, that's a
one
great
question.
question. It's a pain. That's where the problem starts. Who was that? Whose question is that? I like that one.
That was Collins.
Oh my goodness, Collins, it's a big problem. How do large organization? Thank you, Raja. It is not an SCSSP. But from a certified guy, Mr. Raja there. Thank you. That's the big one. Oh my goodness. Collins, this one is a tough one. To do this kind of thing, they got dedicated, the banks that I work for, where Mike talked about, they got dedicated teams, compliance team that do these things. It is a tough one. Let me tell you what they do. It is so difficult to be compliant and do this access review that they actually brought us in as contractor to do another layer. So they have a first layer of guys who do access reviews. We came in and look again on top of what they're doing, what we call risk assessment, and do recommendations. So we have a double risk review because nobody can get it right. You know what is a problem? I'm sorry to say to the managers out there, I apologize in advance. The managers are fatigued of approving stuff that they don't know, have no idea what they're approving. Because I'm giving them, especially with people who are using this SAFE model. I apologize. Thanks. Our SAFE folks, where people are assigned to teams and to whatever, Scrum teams, and most of the people who are in charge of those people don't know what people are doing and what type of access they need. It is difficult because all they're going to do is rubber stamp everything. They don't know. You can't blame them. And managers are supposed to be rubber stamping 30 reviews and 30 people under them or 40 people under them. Unfortunately, Collins, we don't have a solution for that yet. Maybe AI will help us.
Right. Let's see.
Aleda.
Let's get to Aleda, and then we'll get to the rest of the questions that have come in through the chat.
Hi, thank you for the session. So my question is, when it comes to human and non-human user,
yes,
how do you allocate access? Okay, for example, let's assume like we're looking at users that are in the HR department, for example, and HR also have its own applications and all. So does the access so if you have like how do I say that? How do I say? I mean, I'm just asking, is the access in terms of the way the policy would be, or how you're going to control the access? Is it going to be the same for the users in that department alongside the application, or it differs?
absolutely. It's a great question. I think to answer that question carefully, I would say all access or all policy engines, when I mean by policy engine, I mean our IGA thing, that particular department will have to go through our engine. And we, as the IAM, whatever, not you, the IAM administrator will have to manage that particular access and set the policies centrally. Here's a rule. All policies need to be centrally managed. That's the rule. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. All policies centrally managed in our context, right? In our context.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So there's just no way around that one.
Okay. So the other question I have is in regards to privilege access. You did mention about monitoring privilege access, which is key. So my question is, I'm aware there are some tools that does that privilege access monitoring. What are we looking out for that would be like how do I call it?
Abnormalities.
Yeah, anomalies, exactly.
Anomalies,
Yeah.
sorry.
Like red flag, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, you have to set the P word again, policies in terms of what you want to monitor. And you
Okay.
need to adjust that a little bit and make sure that you have your abuse cases in a certain way. In other words, abuse cases where people, what is an abuse case? Abuse case is Chris Johnson is doing multiple transactions a day. For some reason, he's always in his Finance DB database. I don't know what is he doing there. He's always checking things out. He's snooping around. That's unusual for Chris Johnson to be clicking around in our financial system. Why is he doing it so much? That's an abnormality. The other one is, why is Sharon logging in at 2 a.m. every Friday? That's an abnormality. And you can think of different use cases like that. So you want to tailor your thing to do it. I know the SIM can tell us what to do, but the question is, how do you determine what is alerts, abuse, and how do you determine what is use? What is happy? Okay, it's very, very difficult, guys. It's constant tuning. That's why you have 10 people, 15 people watching the SIM all the time. But how do you do that? And somebody's mentioned more behavioral patterns, and that's great. Behavioral patterns is one we mentioned already, like Chris logging in unusually and Sharon logging in 2 a.m. Into our HR system for some reason. I don't know. And somebody mentioned context awareness. Context awareness meaning conditional access. We know the context of where you are, what time of the context meaning what time of the day, where you from, what system or device are you using? What is the other one? Device using and who are you, right? And are you allowed to do it? Those are the contexts we need to be aware of. All great things. So yeah, somebody's using words. We kind of alluded to these technologies, but I wasn't sure if everybody was aware of these words. Those are the terms we use in this industry: contextual awareness and behavioral analytics. Correct. Those are all correct.
Okay, thank you so much. So my final one in regards to privilege access is, I think CyberArk, I'm not sure, is used to monitor privilege access, if that is correct.
That's
I'm not
correct.
sure. Okay, yeah. So when it comes to utilizing it, will we just kind of scan it on the account and it's going to, or kind of check this anomaly for us? Or is it like something that is constantly logging, like like another form of SIM of some sort? As in SIM, I mean security information and event monitoring.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And somebody's talking about SIEM, which is another way to log. And I would do CyberArk also has to be watched by a SIEM.
Okay.
Not just a SIEM, but also a SOAR, right?
Yeah.
SIEM SOAR. So we always put them together.
Together, yeah.
So yeah, so you want to do that. CyberArk basically just record the sessions and checks your monitors your activity. It is specifically to do with people are interacting with that specific system at that time. It records that session. It audits that transaction.
Gotcha.
Thank
and you.
But that must also talk to a SIM as well, right? Your CyberArk. Yeah.
Okay. So the SIM sats will be sitting as the central database of log collection.
There is another word. Centrally, besides policy, there's another central word. Centrally monitor activity. That's another key principle. John.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, before we get to John, I'm going to knock out a couple of questions from the chat box here. What is the best form of cybersecurity measure that can be deployed in a LAN environment?
Cybersecurity what? Sorry?
I think this might be more of a Mike question when we get back when we get into the additional things. What is the best form of cybersecurity measures that can be deployed in a LAN environment?
Although to measure the same principle, seems so, you must want to do that, IDS, IPS, but Mike will go into those details.
Yeah.
In the LAN environment, I mentioned microsec. The question is kind of, the verb is kind of ambiguous in your question. If you can maybe clarify the verb a little more, the doing thing.
Yeah. All right. So, so this question, how much is IGA, active user base, tiered, etc., per user per month a year?
Oh yeah, it depends on a vendor. I think, what have I seen? For example, 110, maybe 250. I mean, there's big organization like Amazon. I mean, 200,000, 100,000. I know they distribute it across the world, but you must look at the vendor specs. And also when you look into that, make sure there's no rate limiting, right? Because they do rate limiting. Because otherwise, if they don't relate rate limiting, the system can be exhausted with a bunch of requests. Remember the pizza example. The system must be available. Make sure your system is SOC 2 compliant, okay? You guys look this up. In your notes later on, make sure it's SOC 2 compliant. Make sure that it doesn't rate limit you. What else?
Was that for me? What else?
Oh, no, the class. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next question, and then we'll get to John. Next question is, how does AWS IAM differ from Azure AD?
From Azure AD. Okay. Besides the Cognito versus the Entra ID, AWS IAM uses I'm going to be speaking from the identity base, right? So AWS does not use our favorite word, non-human accounts. They don't use service accounts, they use roles. Okay, when you log into AWS, I'm not an AWS guy, but this is what I know. They come in, you assume a role, and then you can access, and it only gives you temporary access if you are federating into it. For example, my solution at home, I'm federating it. I don't have accounts inside the accounts. I'm using a skimmed connection. I'm connecting to my source of truth is Entra. All my accounts sync up to the cloud, AWS and GCP. I federate into it. And what I do get, I'm using what's called permission sets. I'm using permission sets. What is permission sets? Permission set is the same concept of policies or permissions or your role-based access control. What it does is a bunch of permissions that you get when one of my fake users, Sam Clown, gets onto the AWS portal. Sam Clown is an administrator. I give him a set of permissions. So Sam Clown assumes the permissions or policies, they call them, for example, and then those policies allow Sam Clown to do things. How do I set the policy? The policies are all set in a permission sets. That's a new way of doing it. Okay. And those policies will determine whether Sam Cloud can access S3 bucket, like I mentioned before. Same principle again. Authentication or authorization. Make sure that we set our policies there in our permission sets. And then once you're done, and then you can get off. And then it's tied to particular accounts, what you can do. So they're using policies and roles in AWS. And in Azure, they're using our role-based access control. That's basically, yeah, you select a role or you assign a role to an account. And then this particular workflow, there's different ways. They've separated it separately. It's very different in Azure. In Azure, they got a separate thing called Entra, which is separate. And then they got a separate thing called Azure. Azure is where you get all your workloads, your VMs, whatever the cloud people do in the cloud and all the stuff. But my focus is on the Entra piece, which is your groups, users, your identity protection, your security engines, your defender for cloud, your security postures, separate. This separate entity controls your workloads, your VMs, EC2 in AWS, your storage, S3 in AWS, etc., etc. So RBAC versus policy-based. One uses the policies, the other one uses RBAC. But please check me out on that one. I'm not particularly in AWS space.
Right. So John had his hand up a moment ago. Let me see.
Yeah, where's John?
Still wants to ask a question.
And also there's logging, both do Trail. Sentinel is what they use. The SIM solution in AWS is called Sentinel. I forgot about that. Keep on forgetting about logging. So logging, CloudTrail in AWS. So logging is always a key part of identity and access management or any IAM or security. You must be able to log activities. They use CloudWatch for all of that in AWS. Azure uses what for CloudWatch? I don't know. I know they have something that they with monitors. I think everything goes to Central. I could be wrong.
All right, John, Ranger.
My question was actually, you were discussing about, you have, your application has to keep an eye on someone logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. In my role, I go and visit all the sites. Sometimes I'll be in China or I'll be in the UK, I'll be in Houston. So at 2 o'clock in the morning might be 8 a.m. in somewhere else, right? Does the app determines your geographic location by just logging in first to your laptop and say, hey, it's 8 o'clock in China, by the way.
Yes.
It's midnight somewhere else. So it does take that into consideration. So I'm not
It does. It has something called geolocation. Correct. It does have that built in.
And does it take does your laptop tells you, or the timestamp on your laptop gives you that information or gives that
Yes.
information?
You got the right idea.
So I have to
Because
make sure.
you're interacting with a device.
Okay. Because my laptop sometimes, because of some administrative privileges, won't let me adjust the time. Right? It's locked out. So I have to make sure.
Yeah. For you, we'll have a policy for that, right? PBAC for you. For your role, we'll have a particular PBAC for that. We know your behavior. We look at your behavioral patterns. We know exactly he's everywhere in that particular location, that geographic location. We do have PBAC for that. We can make sure that you have access.
Okay.
But if somebody else in your group does it too, fencing, you mean fencing, Daniel? Fencing, like a geofencing?
Geofencing. Okay.
Geofencing is something else. Yeah. Fencing is a different thing in terms of restriction. Okay, anyway.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So we're gonna wrap it up here in just a minute. I've got a couple more questions and then we'll stop. I only have one more question. Okay. And so this will be our last question. How does CIAM handle scalability and performance for millions of users? For modern CIAM systems are cloud native and globally distributed?
Absolutely. The vendor handles all of that. So the nice thing about most of the CIAM solutions today, you buy the product, make sure it's SOC 2 compliant. You buy the product for compliance, for security reasons. You buy the product and your vendor, wherever that is, again, make sure that you're not rate limited. In other words, your system doesn't slow down when your demand increases. That is handled by a third party. Your vendor that you're buying it from, you're going to set up upfront with them and you tell them you're going to be scaling a lot and we need this requirements. They'll handle that for you. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure. In fact, one of the new ones that I've seen is there's nothing at your office. Everything handles some cloud location. And they do everything for you. All you have to do is they give you login and you go to admin portal and then you set it up. So don't worry about make sure that you do that, please. And I've noticed when I was consulting, many of the clients forget to ask for the rates limiting issue. Please keep that in mind. You don't want to be rate limited. Because, they have to be cautious as well, right? What's up with the sudden spike from this guy? From 1 to 2 million users. Oh my goodness. Let's throttle it. So the other thing is called throttling, right? They throttle your requests. They do that. Not rate, sorry. I apologize. My accent is a little off here. Rate limiting. Sorry, not RAID. Rate limiting.
Right.
Not the redundant array. What? Redundant array of inexpensive disks. Not that one.
No.
That's got to do with the data piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to the
Oh
end.
my goodness, that was fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
I
That
don't think
brings
you're
us
going
to
to
the
see me
end.
again. I'm done with this one.
Yeah. Now, of course, if you're in our security architect program, you get
You can
extra
see me
Isaac.
on Thursdays at
Yeah. So
MST 4. I have to teach it in an hour because I got another
you're
class
right,
at
right.
9 hour.
Get you a nap in.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right. Thank you,
Take
everybody.
care.
Bye,
I
Isaac.
appreciate it, everybody. Thanks, Raja, for coming. And what's the other lady? My other student, I forgot her name because I haven't seen her in
Yeah.
a while. Thank you.
All
Where
right.
are
Well,
you?
thank you so much, Isaac. I'm going to take you off screen so you can go get a
Thank
nap.
you. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the end, everybody. We are going to wrap it up here. Now, of course, we will continue next Thursday. Be on the lookout for a copy of the recording, as well as notifications about next Thursday's session. So thank you all. It was really great questions, great interaction, and a lot of fun. So hope everybody has a great day, great afternoon. And again, if you're in the Security Architect program, don't miss class in an hour.